All right, it's 12:16. I'd like to call us back into session. So let's proceed with the matter at hand, which is the complainant asserts the respondent did not provide complete information in certain campaign finance reports and accepted direct corporate activity in her campaign finances. So, Mr. Hicks.
My opening statement.
Before we start, just to say, the commission has essentially a hard out. Member needs to leave at 3:30. So,
Okay.
you know, I mean, if it goes beyond, we may be back again, but we got a hard out at 3:30.
In theory, I have a hard out between 1:30 and 2.
You're
So
good?
your calendar for this meeting was scheduled from 10 to 1. So you just mentioned 3, Mr. Ricker, so my expectation is that this meeting will be somewhat in the confines of the time schedule that was called for and noticed to the public.
Thank you.
Is that, given I have to make a case, is that a correct assumption?
Yes,
that
that's
this
a correct
meeting will-
assumption.
okay.
Yes.
We're here for hearing today, and at least it's our expectation we will go until finished. He has no witnesses, and Ms. Schmidt will testify
And-
if
and
it
the-
comes to that.
Perfect. And in the past, we have gone past the time that's on the sheet if we need to, knowing at this, this point, we have something in the commissioner that has to be out by 3:30. So
Sure.
if you're amenable to that, at this point, we're just wasting time talking back and forth
Well,
about it.
but
So
I've expressed that I have a commitment where I need to leave here between 1:30 and 2.
okay, perfect. So let's begin so we can move forward as quickly as possible and still give everyone the time they deserve.
Okay. So I want to, set papers up on this. So just by way of an opening, thank you, Commission, for having this hearing. What I think is really important about this hearing and some of the hearings I bring is that I'm sure it gets a lot of you to think about the rules, how they get applied, and so on and so forth, and I think this one will cause you to think as well. I've known Gene Schmidt for some time. I'm a resident of Claremont County. Gene Schmidt is my state representative currently, and I filed this complaint. My first affidavit related to the complaint was filed on the 8th of June in 2021. So just think about how long ago that was. So this has been quite some time ago. And what I want to do as an opening is walk through the actual complaint, so that everybody is well familiar with what was in the complaint, what I alleged in the complaint, and then I'll proceed into witnesses from there. So there's actually 2 versions of the complaint. In the materials I handed out, the page numbers at the bottom, it starts with page 24 is the first, and page 33 is the second. The reason I wanted to have page numbers at the bottom is because, as some of you have observed even from Mr. O'Brien's file, is that there's sub numbers of exhibits and so forth that can get confusing because you're flipping through a document and you see the same number again. So I'm going to start with the first version, which is the original complaint, and then I'll just briefly cover the second complaint, what was added to it. So I'm going to direct you on that on page 24 to the, first off, I want to direct you first to page 25. Again, I'm going off of the numbers at the bottom of the pages that I gave you. And I'm going to come back. So my allegation is against Ms. Schmidt and or Schmidt for Ohio. You see that multiple times there. Ms. Schmidt and or Schmidt for Ohio failed to. Ms. Schmidt or Schmidt for Ohio may have failed to account for. So I just want to make clear that my original complaint was for the candidate and the candidate committee. For the candidate committee, it's clearly stated within the affidavit itself. Now let me go back to the beginning of the affidavit, and I want to lay out what's alleged in here. So in the 2020 campaign, which we might all remember, the COVID interrupted primary campaign, et cetera, there were 2 candidates in my area that were team householder candidates, Gene Schmidt and Alan Freeman. They had I will prove today that they had a team associated with them of consultants that were helping them with their campaigns. There are 2 of them are referenced in here. R.J. Mancini and Steve Carroll. Those particular individuals never appeared on any campaign finance report. So I established my personal knowledge by researching. First off, I had met R.J. Mancini and Luke Householder, which is another person that was involved in this. I had met them by introduction from Steve Carraway at an event in Claremont County at a place called R.J.'s Tap Room Theater. At that time, those people were working sort of a symbiotic Alan Freeman campaign and Gene Schmidt campaign, two householder candidates in the Claremont County area. Those of you who are involved in, and you'll see it in the exhibits here, those of you that were involved in the Freeman case know that a lot of things were symbiotic. The media placements were done together, they showed up on the same invoices, et cetera, and I'll show that in the exhibits here. So when I realized that in the case of Ms. Schmidt, these particular resources, I don't allege here media buys. So those of you might not be familiar, but in the Freeman matter, it had to do with the TV media buys mostly. It involved these resources also, but that was the main thing. And here I don't talk about media buys or television media buys. I talk about the people that were helping Gene Schmidt's campaign, but never showed up on any campaign finance report. And they weren't helping with, like strategic media placements, doing radio ads and TV ads. They weren't doing mailers. They were out in the field helping with candidates, and they were being compensated for that work. I'll prove all that as we go to the hearing today when I present witnesses. So, after ascertaining that there was not any, that these costs had never appeared on any campaign finance report, and to this day have never appeared on any campaign finance report, I filed this complaint. So, which is kind of funny when you think about it, I filed it back on 8th of June 2021. I'm sure you'll hear from Mr. O'Brien and Ms. Schmidt that they showed a constant content expense. If people aren't familiar with constant content, there were two entities involved with Larry Householder candidates. You've heard of some of them probably in the media. I'm not going to go to that level. You've got Growth and Opportunity and so on and so forth, and First Energy. But down in the trenches, there were two specific entities. Constant Content, both were controlled by Jeff Longstrom. Constant Content, which is a corporation who was doing basically media things for candidates, and JPL and Associates, which is an LLC that was doing the resources in the field. And those were the two entities that you were seeing on the ground, and where the people worked for, where they were connected to, either Constant Content or JPL and Associates. And they were both helping teen householder candidates, including Ms. Schmidt. Ms. Schmidt showed expenses for Constant Content, which is part of the exhibits, and this is the second affidavit. She showed expenses for Constant Content, the media arm. She never showed any expenses for either the resource arm, particularly Steve Carraway, who was a consultant to our campaign, and she never showed R.J. Mancini. R.J. Mancini, just for sake of background, I'll prove and show that R.J. Mancini was compensated not by either Constant Content or JPL. He was compensated by the Ohio Republican Party. Okay? He was supposed to be working only with endorsed candidates of the Ohio Republican Party. But he was repurposed to work with only two candidates on the campaign, which I'll prove. Alan Freeman and Gene Schmidt. Neither of which were endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party. Neither of which were endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party in the 2020 primary. So in the first affidavit, there's a set of exhibits that I provided with the original affidavit. Exhibit 1, which is on page 26, was showing that R.J. Mancini, who worked as a quote-unquote campaign manager or door knocker, you get both definitions, campaign manager and door knocker are apparently synonymous. So that shows that he was being compensated during this entire period by the Ohio Republican Party. Exhibit 2, which again I established personal knowledge of by doing a lot of research. Exhibit 2 is actually one of Mr. Mancini's pay stubs, because he provided for some discovery. Technically he didn't have to, but he provided discovery, and within it he provided pay stubs for his compensated work with the Ohio Republican Party. Exhibit 3 which is page 29. Page 29 is R.J. Mancini getting assigned to work on Gene Schmidt's Facebook page. Okay? And then there's something in this one too, I think, about going to an event to get pictures. So, and this is again, Exhibit 3 came from R.J. Mancini, who was working with the Schmidt and Freeman campaigns. Exhibit 4 is relevant, but it's really not overly relevant to this particular matter at this point. Exhibit 4 is the constant content invoice that showed a series of candidates on it that were team house order candidates, and it's page 30. And that particular thing shows, for example, Brian Stewart. In theory, right now, we have a hearing on Brian Stewart on May 25th. Alan Freeman, you guys, if you weren't here, you were aware of Alan Freeman, and Gene Schmidt. And these were for media expenditures that had to do with commercials, radio, TV, so on and so forth. And I will say, in deference to the Schmidt campaign, they did show, I don't know that one could reconcile it to the penny, but they showed expenses for this. They showed expenses for constant content for these media activities. And then Exhibit 5 is people that are working on these campaigns being informed of polling location changes. It's important to know Tom Young and Representative Grandel had nothing to do with Claremont County or our area. This particular email was copied to R.J. Mancini and Luke Householder, who again were working of these candidates only with the Schmidt campaign. And then Exhibit 6 was, I mentioned that Gene Schmidt had showed expenses. Exhibit 6 is her husband, the treasurer, paying $100,000 of $164,000 expense relating to media to constant content. So that was my original affidavit. So what I asserted, and if you go look at, there's some little differences between the amended one that I can point out that are very simple. And what I hope to prove today is on page 25 of the, again, using the numbers at the bottom of the pages that I handed you, is that Representative Schmidt, you see these failures are in violation of or possibly in violation of, sort of in the middle of that page of what happened. 351713 BCE, B, C, and D. Those have to do with filing a complete and accurate campaign finance statement. The distinction between B, C, and D of that statute has to do with whether they are pre-election, post-election, annual, or semi-annual. So those of you that should all know that candidates have to file various reports. The statute that governs that is 3517A and 351713, and there's different segments of that statute that relate to. And I'll prove without, I don't think, any doubt that the campaign finance reports filed were not complete and accurate. And I also want to point out that my affidavit and the August, I think you said 12th, Mr. O'Brien, preliminary review, that Ms. Schmidt and her campaign have known they've not been accurate. They've known that for years. And I don't believe, maybe they'll make a statement here that they've actually taken some measure to correct that, but I don't think they've taken any measure to correct that. I think I can prove it. The second one there, 351710D2, is this. That one has to do with the treasurer and the treasurer's responsibility. There's actually no penalty for that one. I think it's in the statutes, but there's no penalty if they don't do it. And then finally, 359903B1 has to do with acceptance of direct corporate contributions. Just for sake of the commissioners, this particular statute, the other particular statutes don't reference criminal penalties or criminal culpability. This one does. So this is the statute that is punishable by up to $1,000 fine for accepting corporate contributions, or up to 1 year in jail, and or up to 1 year in jail. So that's the statute of this list of statutes that gets into this area of, is there criminal liability involved with the statute? Of course, the commission doesn't make any representation of, you don't have criminal, you're going to throw somebody in the clink, but that's where the kind of things where referrals could come out of them. Because if you found a violation in one of those areas, there could then be a criminal referral associated with this. So that's what I allege has happened. And as you note, and those of you that are new, I appreciate some of the discussion that happened, are newer on this commission, is this is kind of a unique situation. I think I'll prove all those points. But if this happened, you know, let's pretend something bad happened at your house, somebody robs you. You go to the police. The police get a report from you. The prosecutor files an indictment, figures out what crimes have been committed, and that handles the case. The way this body works, if a private party like me brings something forward, in theory, and this was argued in the Alan Freeman matter, I have to identify to the letter and to the penny what exact statutes were broken up front, which is kind of peculiar. It's another thing that you should probably address. But I think I'll prove those to the degree, I'll prove at least the first one. The second one doesn't have a direct penalty. The third one related to corporate contributions, I think that'll come out in the wash. And that has to do with what was reported and what wasn't reported and who actually paid for the expenses. The second affidavit really only had, I've directed page 34 in that to understand the charges that I put forward. And it says amended edition in big yellow type on there. It's the only real change of this, it's another exhibit. But what happened was during the course of things, it came to light that Constant Content had a person acting as a collection agent, David Goldstein, to go out and collect unpaid candidate debts related to Constant Content. And so that's what this is about, what the addition is, and I'm going to flip back here. And there was some new reporting that became available during this time period. So if you look in this particular deck, as it relates to the original complaint, Exhibit 7 is some campaign finance reporting information that I got from the Secretary of State relating to the debt owed to Constant Content at that time. If you remember in the first one I showed you, there was a $100,000 check. The total amount was $164,000, so there was still a debt for $64,000. But most importantly in this was this additional expense that had to do with David Goldstein. And so if you look in this, on one of these pages in here, what happened was, well, by the way, it's also, if I didn't have it in here by accident, it's in Mr. O'Brien's exhibits, but for sake of just an opening, I won't go into the detail of it, is that there was an amount of about $20,000 that was, I guess, billed to Gene Schmidt's campaign by Constant Content via collection agent David Goldstein. By the way, this was after all the Larry Householder indictments. Jeff Longstreth was trying to collect past debts through this guy named David Goldstein. That showed on Gene Schmidt's campaign finance report as an amount for $20,000 for David Goldstein. And that and as I said, that's in your exhibits. I saw it in your exhibits. If I included the wrong pages here. But that's why there was an amended complaint to draw in that there was this other amount of money that was involved in this. And I think I'll prove conclusively that that payment was for mailers. I'll prove it with his own opening. That the payment that was made to Constant Content through David Goldstein was for mailers that were done for the Schmidt campaign. Which brings me back to where I started. The key part of this complaint, what I brought forward, is that there were resources working out in the field that were being paid for and compensated. One by the Ohio Republican Party, one by JPL and Associates, that were jointly supporting the campaigns of Alan Freeman and Gene Schmidt. Those resources to this day have never shown on a campaign finance report. And I think this is pretty important. What's kind of funny is Mr. Richter said earlier on today, mentioned, you know, the kind of cases that typically come before the commission, coming from a board of elections, so on and so forth. This is a householder case. Probably going to need more of these, should be more of these. And these process questions for a commission that's existed for how long? On discovery, so on and so forth. These shouldn't be questions at this point. And we should recognize that you have people up here in an organization, down to the candidate down here in an organization. And they're all along that way, stuff not being reported correctly, and it's an abomination of our campaign finance rules. And I'll prove through this hearing that R.J. Mancini and Stephen Carroll, those two in particular, were working for the Gene Schmidt campaign. They were being compensated, and they never showed up on any campaign finance report. And I appreciate you taking the time to walk through and understand these complaints and what was in them, because I think it'll be very important for you guys to adjudicate your responsibilities as an election commission. Thank you.
Thank you. May it please, Madam Chairman, members of the commission. I counted as Mr. Hicks was speaking to you all, the name Larry Householder, Team Householder 12 times. This case isn't about Team Householder, isn't about Larry Householder. It's about Gene Schmidt and whether on March 4th of 2020 or June 4th of 2020, she or her treasurer filed a false, inaccurate campaign finance report. Period. That's what this case is about. Mr. Hicks wants to bring in other people and mentioned a lot of other names. His complaint that was filed in June of 21 claims, number one, a man named R.J. Mancini was paid by the Ohio Republican Party to work on Gene Schmidt's campaign, and that wasn't accounted for. Well, at least I have in my exhibits an affidavit, first from the executive director of the Ohio Republican Party, and that's contained at the rear of my motion to dismiss that I referenced before. And that document is a man by the name of Rob Seacauer, S-E-C-A-U-E-R. And what Mr. Seacauer says in Exhibit 4, I don't have mine separately paginated, but it's an affidavit that he signed back August 10th of 21, 2 days before the hearing in which Mr. Richter recommended this case be thrown out. Mr. Seacauer says in the affidavit, after being sworn, he was executive director of the Ohio Republican Party for 4 years, including this primary period, and he did not, and the Republican Party did not, assign Mr. Mancini or any other person to specifically work or volunteer on Ms. Schmidt's campaign. And in fact, one thing Mr. Hicks said is true is because there was no endorsed candidate in that race, they could not, by their bylaws, pay for someone to work on this campaign. So Mr. Seacauer is your executive director saying it didn't happen. Mr. Hicks can speculate, he can say he met somebody in a coffee shop in Claremont County. That does not prove that Mr. Mancini was compensated to work on Ms. Schmidt's campaign. Ms. Schmidt has been running for office for 25 years or better that I know of, and she is a very active grassroots campaigner herself. She goes door to door. She knocks on the door. She doesn't need someone she doesn't know to knock on the doors. And at least I noted, just parenthetically, and again, it's in both my exhibits and Mr. Hicks's exhibits, but the pay stub that he presented to you, it says he proved on the campaign. It shows a payment on March 8th of $2,000. The item that he has as Exhibit 1 says on March 8th he was paid a different amount. So I don't know what this payroll stub is. Apparently it came from Mr. Mancini, but the address for Mr. Mancini on it is in the city of Cincinnati, Ohio, not Claremont County. Number two, I noticed as a former city attorney here in Columbus that there was a city of Columbus deduction for income tax. It would require him to be working in the city of Columbus at the time. While Mr. Hicks says that this pay stub is for him working on the Schmidt campaign in Claremont County. So those discrepancies are clearly indicate that he doesn't prove what he stands up here and tells you he's going to prove. To top that off, I contacted Mr. Mancini right after this complaint was filed against Ms. Schmidt, and I believe it's Exhibit 5 in my packet of information that I gave to you. It's an affidavit from Mr. Mancini about 10 days before that preliminary review the commission had. And on August 2nd, Mr. Mancini says that he was not paid by the Republican Party to work on the March 20 primary on a specific campaign or a specific candidate's campaign, and he was not directed by the Ohio Republican Party or their employees to specifically work or volunteer on the Gene Schmidt campaign for March of 20. So Mr. Mancini says, I didn't work and be paid on this campaign. Mr. Seekar, who's the executive director, other than the chairman, the highest person with that party, says, we didn't direct him to work on that campaign. Surely, I believe Mr. Mancini was paid, but he was probably paid to work on various campaigns. And most of you probably are familiar with documents that might be called a slate card, where maybe there's 15 candidates on it. That's the kind of thing the Republican Party would have an interest in seeing spread out. Why that might indirectly benefit Ms. Schmidt if her name is on it, perhaps. But there's going to be no evidence whatsoever. And Mr. Mancini under oath said, I wasn't assigned to, didn't work for, and wasn't paid to work on Ms. Schmidt's campaign. So that is why, and that would ordinarily be listed as an in-kind contribution to a campaign. It's not money, it's resources, as Mr. Hicks describes it. That would be reported to Peter Schmidt, her treasurer, as an in-kind contribution, and then the treasurer can include that in-kind contribution. And she did report an in-kind contribution from her sister, who held an event for her, and there was some expenses paid for by her sister on that primary campaign that were listed as an in-kind contribution, which is something other than a direct financial contribution, a check made out to her campaign, for example. So we have no in-kind contribution reported them so as to require them to report it. And on top of that, we don't have an in-kind contribution because Mr. Seekauer says, I didn't pay him to do it, didn't sign him to do it. And Mr. Mancini said, I wasn't paid to do it. Now, I think both Mr. Mancini and another person's name that is included in the complaint, Stephen Carraway, because they come from that area, they know Ms. Schmidt, they like Ms. Schmidt, and they may have helped her in one way or another on the campaign. But for an in-kind contribution, it has to be a compensation for it. Mr. Hicks spends time working against candidates such as Ms. Schmidt. I have not seen his name on Ms. Schmidt's opponent's finance report saying that Mr. Hicks was out down at the Township Hall in Milford, where he includes an email that someone had been asked to attend and take a picture of Ms. Schmidt there. That series of emails you will not see Ms. Schmidt copied on. Again, getting back to her knowledge, is there something that should be reported, because as you'll hear regarding the constant content information, she reported the constant content debt of $164,000 on her post-primary report. It also reflected a payment, and the check is in my exhibit, of $100,000. Her campaign paid $100,000 to Constant Content for media and other campaign consulting. That's fully, completely, absolutely reported, and it's contained on exhibit 7. And so she reported, thank you, Mr. Hicks, in this $100,000 check she reported. And behind that check are the documents from the Secretary of State that show she reported it. And because the balance was $164,000, she paid $100,000 of it. She also reported a $64,000 debt. That's proper. She disclosed it. That's what campaign finance is about, is disclosure. She disclosed $164,000 that Constant Content had secured advertising and other campaign consultant work for. She paid $100,000 of it, said, I still owe $64,000. By the next report, the semi-annual report that Mr. Hicks referred to, and again, that is an exhibit there in number 7. You will see behind it that it says a balance of $64,354.31 was paid by her before the next report was due, which was a semi-annual report, the payment date July 27th of 20. So we have constant content being reported, disclosed, transparent, not hidden, not failing to be accurate and complete. She filed the report showing the debt, showing the payments, and she discharged it before the next report. As to the personnel, be they Mr. Mancini or some of these other people, and I thought the amendment dealt with the other people such as Mr. Caraway and Tommy Rolfe that he claims were being compensated to work up for the campaign. You will not hear one bit of evidence that they were compensated to work on Gene Schmidt's campaign. Mr. Caraway is a longtime friend. She attended his wedding. He's a personal friend. If he did anything to help her, I'm sure it was gratuitous because he supports her. He wasn't paid to work on her campaign. And moreover, those that were listed on that series of emails that were attached, I think, to Mr. Hicks's complaint, you do not see Ms. Schmidt copied on those. She isn't being advised that anyone is being asked to work on her campaign. It might cause her to make an inquiry. I'd like to finish by talking a little bit about Dave Goldstein. Dave Goldstein is a local lawyer here in Columbus, Ohio. He does many things, personal injury primarily, but apparently was engaged in some collection work for Constant Content. And I think what happened was Ms. Schmidt, having paid $164,000 to Constant Content, which is a large number for a primary campaign, she thought that all the bills, all the invoices had been taken care of.
Never got the bill.
Right, that's my point. She never got a bill saying you owe more than $164,000 until, and I think the time frame is important, until the summer of last year. The summer of 2022, a collection lawyer named Goldstein sends a letter not only to Ms. Schmidt, I might add, but a whole bunch of other people saying, you owe Constant Content some more money. Well, Mr. Goldstein, upon being contacted, said, tell us why. Mr. Goldstein couldn't tell us why. Mr. Goldstein said, well, my client says that you owe additional money. Having paid $164,000, Ms. Schmidt said, if you can show me I owe you money, I'll be happy to pay it because I'm not a deadbeat. And I want to report it. If the money was spent on my behalf, be it mailings or anything else, I want to pay it. So what did she do? And it's shown in exhibit number 7 attached to my document. Brian Katz is the head in the Secretary of State's office of campaign finance report. She sent an email. Mr. Katz, or Peter Schmidt, her husband, the treasurer, sent an email saying that Gene had talked to Mr. Katz regarding a disputed debt because Mr. Goldstein never did prove that money was owed, but it was settled, and they agreed to settle it for the amount of around $20,000, and the payment was made, and that was properly reported. That was transparent. As soon as she found out, and she can't report things she doesn't know about, as soon as she found out that there was a claim by Constant Content that additional money was paid, owed, again, you can see an email from Mr. Goldstein to Peter Schmidt with an invoice, a reduced invoice, because they claim more than that, of $20,260, and then attached to that document is a check to David Goldstein. Mr. Hicks, maybe not here this morning, but has said, well, why didn't it say Constant Content instead of David Goldstein? Because, you know, you're hiding it by writing a check to Mr. Goldstein and reporting it under his name. The Secretary of State, Mr. Brian Katz, told him to do it that way, and that's why that email was there from Ms. Schmidt's treasurer to Mr. Katz saying, tell us what to do. We want to do this right. This is dealing with a February or March of 20 expenditure that we just found out in the summer of 2022 about. Some lawyer writes a letter, we know there were mailings, and we thought they were covered with the $164,000 check we wrote, but apparently if they're saying there were more, tell us what it is, and Mr. Goldstein provided sufficient other information to show, yeah, maybe there were some more mailings, some more printing costs, some more postage. And so as soon as that became aware of, as Mr. Schmidt says in the email to Mr. Katz, that they paid it. The invoice was dated November 4th of 20, which is the first they knew about it, related to a March primary, but it wasn't received until August of 21. He amended the 20 post-general report and the 20 annual report and the 21 semi-annual report. So he is not hiding anything. He amended 3 reports with this Goldstein claim from constant content, and that is in file with the Secretary of State, which is listed after that document. So at every stage of these proceedings, this woman has held office. She was a member of Congress, United States Congress in the early 2000s in the city of Cincinnati. She has been running for office and filing these reports for a long time, and she knows what the rules are, and she doesn't want to make any mistakes. And so she paid constant content as soon as she knew the amount. She listed it as a debt for the balance. She paid that before the next report. And Mr. Mancini and Mr. Caraway and Mr. Rolfe, she has no idea what they did on her campaign. Somewhere along the line, I think Mr. Hicks has some document that says Mr. Mancini says maybe once or maybe twice he did knock on some doors for Ms. Schmidt. Well, was Ms. Schmidt there? Did she get told about it? Did she know he was being paid to do it? Or was he being paid to do it? All those things are speculation and innuendo that Mr. Hicks, who apparently for whatever reason has a personal vendetta against Ms. Schmidt, keeps filing these kind of complaints, and that's why we wanted to have the hearing today. And we think that after you hear everything he has to present and look at those documents that are of public record and file, that you will conclude without us even testifying. And that's why we got into that discussion beforehand. It's his burden to prove. Like it or not, he's claiming there were violations. It's his burden to prove, just like if it was a speeding ticket or a murder case. It's his burden to prove, or in a civil case. The plaintiff or the complainant has a burden of proof. He can't carry that burden of proof based on the documents for you. And so I hope at the close of the case you'll see those documents and agree with me and dismiss this case. So thank you for your attention.
Call my first witness. Gene Schmidt. I call Gene Schmidt to testify.
Sure.
Sure.
And at least pursuant to a previous discussion, she doesn't believe he's entitled to do this, but she wants to move forward, and she's happy to testify and explain what happened about these
Absolutely.
events.
Thank you. You'll have to be sworn in.
Yeah.
Okay. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so you guys?
Absolutely.
Now, how do you want to set this up? Like where the witness sits, where the...
Well, why don't you stand at the podium and just let her sit there if that's
I'm not
okay?
comfortable with that. I'd like us to use the same decorum we've used in prior hearings.
No, let's make it so his video can pick her up while she's
Can we
testifying.
stop arguing and just get on with this?
Would you like me to place a chair directly
You
in
know,
front so
that's
we're
where-
kind of face to
I
face?
just want to make sure so the commission members can hear what the testimony is.
Oh,
I
okay.
figure.
You might, when we've done
No,
this
I
before,
would like
like
the
you
commissioners
rotate
to
this.
see me because they're the ones that need to see my eyes.
So I think I also need to be able to see you. So in the past hearings, I just want to be clear here, in past hearings, we usually set the witness up and then have the podium set up for the questioner in a kind of sequence so the commission members can see them and the questioner can see them. So I'd like to have the same actual decorum for how we're running this hearing. We were in the other room before, the bigger room, but
Excuse me, I'll move that over.
Okay, so- Thank you. Thank you for testifying here today, Ms. Schmidt. I'm going to start with a set of questions just to establish your background, your knowledge process, et cetera. But could you state for the record what your full name is?
Jeanette Mary Hoffman Schmidt.
Can you take us through kind of your political experience and history?
Sure, I ran for township trustee, I ran for state representative, I ran for state senate and lost it by 22 votes. I ran for Congress and won, I served 4 terms, I lost that election. Then I decided when this position became available to run for this position.
So would you characterize yourself as an expert in the area of politics in Ohio, campaign finance and other laws based on your extensive
I'm
experience?
not quite an expert, I just have some experience.
You have some experience, okay. Do you have experience with the Ohio Elections Commission?
Yes, I've been here before.
Objection, we're here on a case today from March 4th and June 4th, Your Honor, and I see an exhibit relating to a matter of 18 or more years ago, the statute of which has since been declared unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court, so I don't know why that would be relevant here today.
I think we should just stick to what is at hand, please.
I don't think that's a valid objection. All I asked her was, did she have experience with the Ohio Election Commission?
I've answered the question.
That's a very fair question to be asking in this matter.
I've answered the question.
So what has been your experience with the Ohio Election Commission?
Objection again for the same reason. If Mr. Hicks is on a short leash of time, we ought to get to the point.
I'm on a short leash of time for today, so, at some point, but I think this is an important case, and this kind of rush, I don't think is appropriate. So, Ms. Schmidt, can you discuss, your objection could be noted, okay, but I'd like you to discuss what your experience is before the Ohio Election Commission.
Again, objection if it deals with the case that I referenced to earlier, because that's both irrelevant and since declared the statute that was before the commission unconstitutional.
Can the witness answer the question?
I'd like to chair the rule is what I'd like, Mr. One way or another.
Ms. Schmidt was before the commission on a false statement matter that was pending any number of years ago. The commission made a finding in that case against Ms. Schmidt. I presume that clarifies the circumstance about which you're speaking, Mr. Hicks, sufficiently.
I don't think that's the only time.
There have been several times. I think the most absurd time.
Well, here, why don't you wait till he asks the next question?
No, you want the time. I think the most absurd time was me having to defend the best marathon I ever did in my life. And it's because somebody came before this commission and said, as a woman, I couldn't run that fast, and I wasn't wearing a watch. And the commission decided to put it before a full hearing. October of 1993, I ran a 3:19:09 gun time marathon. Truly the best marathon in my life. And yet I had to prove before this commission that it actually happened. Because the commission wanted to know what marathons were about. How could I run that fast? There was another time where somebody gave very false and serious allegations against me, and I won that case. I also won the fact that I did run a 3:19:09. So can we move on to the next question?
Well, that wasn't actually the case I was thinking of, so you volunteered a case that I was unaware of. So that I'm aware of 2006, and I'm also aware of you bringing Mr. Krikorian before the commission
I
in
just brought that up,
2009.
and I won that case.
Okay. In 2006, just by basis of your background experience with the Ohio Election Commission, what was exactly the allegation and the outcome?
I'm going to object again. 2006 hearing under a statute since declared unconstitutional, is totally irrelevant and consuming and wasting time for the matters at hand.
I think-
Commission, I don't remember all the things of it.
Schmidt,
The
you
only
don't
one I
have to answer that.
clearly remember is my marathon.
Yeah, and you don't have to answer that.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to ask another question. When that happened in 2006, because Mr. O'Brien made lots of representations in his opening about Ms. Schmidt's character. He made representations about, hearsay representations about various people like Stephen Caraway and R.J. Mancini. So if there are things that have happened for this commission that speak to Ms. Schmidt's character and truthfulness and her associations, they are very important to this case. So the question I will ask and seek an object again is, at the time of the 2006 matter, who was your campaign manager and spokesman?
I don't remember.
So I'm going to direct, and I think I gave this to you, Mr. O'Brien, if you could share it with her. I want to introduce an exhibit, which for me would be exhibit, since she stated that she doesn't remember.
The unmarked exhibit.
Yeah, it's unmarked, but I'm going to tell you what number it picks up with. I think my last regular exhibit was 11. So this would be exhibit, I believe it would be, oh no, it isn't one. I just want to make sure I get the right number. It's going to be exhibit 14, and it's the one that's an excerpt of in your stacks, commissioners, it's the one that's is a excerpt from a Cincinnati Enquirer article.
And I'm going to object again. The newspaper article is flatly hearsay, number one, and number two, it has nothing to do with these proceedings. And I would disagree. I did not put her character in issue. I said she was an experienced person who ran for office.
This specifically relates to her lapse of memory relating to who was her campaign, who was her campaign manager and her spokesman at the time. The article was intended to clarify her memory.
We're gonna sustain that. We're gonna move forward from this.
Well, I'm gonna want the record to show that Alan Freeman is quoted in the article and was her spokesman and campaign manager at the time. So, and I would advise the commission.
I move to strike his solicitation of comments, Madam Chairman. He's not entitled to, if you sustain the objection, to read the document to which I objected.
All right, let's move forward from that.
So, Ms. Schmidt, you do not remember who your campaign manager and spokesman was in 2006?
I don't know. I've had so many campaign managers. Alan did work for me at one time. It was for a very brief period of time. It could have been then, but you know, I'm under oath. If I can't remember, then I shouldn't be making an assumption.
Okay. Are you taking any medications currently that might affect your ability to remember?
Nope.
Okay. In the past, have you had any issues with memory?
Nope.
Okay. Can you take us through what was your relationship with Alan Freeman over the years?
Objection, the relationship with Mr. Freeman is not relevant to the March 4th or June 4th campaign finance statement.
It's extremely relevant in that the resources at issue in this campaign are resources that were jointly working on her campaign and Alan Freeman's campaign.
Well, Madam Chairman, you should prove that rather than asking a question about what her relationship is.
Alan Freeman is not a friend. He's an acquaintance. He lives in Pierce Township. He was part of the Hamilton County Republican Party before he became part of the Claremont County Republican Party. That is how I know Alan Freeman. I knew him when he worked briefly as my campaign chairman for a primary that I had. That was about the last contact I had with him until more recently. But if Mr. Hicks is going to say that Alan and I jointly worked together on a campaign, he's absolutely wrong. And I'm going to tell you, if you know anything about me, I run my own campaign. I run my own race. I door knocked relentlessly on this campaign. I knew the risks that were at stake. I got up at 4 o'clock every morning. I ran 4 to 6 miles a day. I went to Mass at St. X downtown at 6 o'clock in the morning. I was out on the streets at 8:30 and I door knocked until the last door, probably about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. I lost a tremendous amount of weight and I did it every day, 7 days a week, until March 13th, when the governor shut us down. And then I made relentless phone calls to people asking for their vote. Nobody ran that campaign but me. JPL didn't run it, Megan Fitzmartin didn't run it, Stephen Caraway didn't run it. I ran my own race, period.
So Ms. Schmidt, I just would like the commission to be aware that Ms. Schmidt just went into an oratory about her mass attendance, about her phone calls, about going door to door. And when the commission, I think we should allow a lot of latitude in this hearing. That's why I didn't object to the stuff that's totally irrelevant. So if we're going to allow latitude so that Ms. Schmidt can go into her mass attendance experience at St. Xavier, then we also have to allow latitude for me when I ask the questions.
Which I think we have, so let's move forward.
Okay. So what about your relationship with, over time and history with Stephen Caraway? Could you lay that out for us?
I'm glad to. I met Stephen when he was in high school, when I was in the state legislature 22 years ago, and he wanted to get involved in politics. He helped me on my state senate campaign as a volunteer. I worked to help him get elected to county commissioner in Adams County. He also worked for me, and when I was in Congress, he was my field rep. He was one of the best howdy and shakers you'll ever meet. He is a very dear friend. I consider him part of my family. I give him his favorite thing is pecan pie. Every year on his birthday, I give him a pecan pie. Every Easter, I give him an Easter bunny from Esther Price. He is a friend. I often joke he is the son I never had. Yes, Stephen helped me on this race, just as he has in every other race. Did he get compensated? He got a pie and a bunny, just like he got throughout the years. He is a friend, Mr. Hicks, and he will always be a friend.
So when it comes to Alan Freeman, how did Alan Freeman and you interact during the 2020 primary campaign?
The only interaction we had was when a group of us, and there were about 7 of us, that did a film together, campaign films. Other than that, we did not interact.
Okay. And what was your, so just to be clear, you did not attend any meetings or after that filming event, which was to film commercials, I think at your sister-in-law's house, if I remember correctly. You didn't have any interactions with him or meetings with him subsequent to that in that primary?
Meetings with him? No.
Alan Freeman.
Were there meetings that we might have been in attendance together? I'm sure there were. But did I meet with Alan and discuss strategy? Absolutely not.
Okay. What about Stephen Caraway? His role in your campaign in 2020 in the
Stephen
primary?
and I talk every day, or just about every day. His role was, I would just cry on his shoulder if I had an issue. He was a friend, and that's all he was. Remember, I ran my own race.
Okay, so what, in terms of your actual campaign activities, what was the role of Stephen Caraway? Were there meetings? Could you just characterize what your campaign activities were that involved Stephen Caraway?
We didn't have meetings, but I probably called him every day to cry on his shoulder.
Okay.
You know, just to talk. Frustration of the day, good day, bad day. I do it all the time. We do it now. As I said, we're friends.
So, I don't know that I fully understand what his role was in relation to your campaign.
I don't either.
You said you called him, you don't understand what his role was.
Well, Mr. Hicks, He's a friend. We talk all the time. I talk to my sister all the time. What was her role in my campaign? What was my husband's role in my campaign? We talk every morning, briefly, and every evening. My daughter, my best friends. I mean, they're all people that you share information and emotions with. They're
So,
friends. They're friends, Chris. They're friends.
So, but for example, did you discuss strategy for door knocking, for other
No,
activities with
I
Stephen
door knock my
Carroll?
own doors. I got my own list from the Board of Election.
So
By the
that-
way, you can get a list from the Board of Elections. They can sort it by super voters or regular voters, households, or streets. And you can check the record with Becky Rudd. I called her up every week for a new list and door knocked that particular area. As I said, I ran my own campaign.
How did you come to be a team householder candidate?
I was gonna run anyway. I know what you're getting at, so I'll tell the whole story. In 2017, my family on my dad's side had a family reunion, and my cousin took me aside and said, "You need to go back to the legislature, we need you." Now, he has a very important role at Porter Wright. I don't really want to give his name, but he really talked to me, and I said, "Man, my husband's never going to go for this." And he said, "Well, you need to talk him into it." Short time, a year later, 2018, Mary Householder called me out of the blue and said, "I'd like you to run." I said, "Man, my husband's never going to go for this." My husband came home that night, we had dinner, we're doing dishes, and I said, "Hey, you'll never guess who called me." He said, "Who?" I said, "Larry Householder." He said, "Do you want you to run for Becker's seat?" I said, "Yep." He said, "Well, then you better raise the money, and you better get your campaign, because you know what's at stake." And I said, "I will." Then I had a meeting with Larry Householder, and he said, "We can give you the resources for your campaign, the media resources for your campaign." I would have gone through somebody anyway, and so we used his resources, which I paid for.
What resources were those?
Every check, the bills that Constant Content presented were the bills that were for my entire campaign, of which I paid.
Were you aware that Stephen Carraway was working for the speaker's organization in that campaign?
There were a lot of-
Objection as to what the speaker's organization is.
JPL and Associates?
Okay, can I-
Objection as to what, that's an LLC that is not connected in any way, shape, or form. Mr. Householder.
That's, yeah.
And again, Mr. Householder's not on trial here. I think I'd ask the chair to move.
We're gonna sustain that. There's no way really.
Okay, so I think, I just want to clarify that it is extremely germane to this case that we have two householder candidates that were running together, and we now have a chair that wants to say that anything about Larry Householder is a sustained objection. There was an organization, the people involved in the organization were part of JPL and Associates and Constant Content. Okay, so me asking questions about those people, and was she aware, for example, that Stephen Carraway worked for JPL and Associates? That's a completely germane question, because part of my allegation is that he did work for her as an employee of JPL and Associates that was never reported on a campaign finance report.
First of all, I didn't say that she didn't have to answer anything about Larry Householder. I'm taking each question as it comes. So please don't categorize it like that. I didn't do that. Second of all, she started to answer the question. If you'd like to finish.
I don't even know what the question was, I'm sorry.
And at least,
The
so
question
not to
was,
have
did you
a-
know that Stephen Carraway was working for the Larry Householder organization / JPL and Associates?
And at least I will, so I don't have to keep interrupting, so we can move it along. I'd like to have a continuing objection to questions dealing with quote-unquote team householder or Larry Householder or JPL. That is irrelevant. We have two campaign finance reports that he chose to claim were inaccurate, and that is is what the hearing should be about. So I won't object, but anything in that arena, I'd like a continuing objection reflected.
So noted.
Thank you.
I'm sure there were many people working for Mr. Householder. What they did, I'm not quite sure, but I know from past experience, when you have a consultant, they have a team. They don't give you an itemized list of who the team is or what they're paid. They give you a bill and you pay it. That was Constant Content's bill, and I paid it.
But I don't know that my question was, were you aware that Stephen Caraway was working for the Larry Household Organization / JPL and Associates? I don't know that you've answered that question still to this point. Yes or no?
Yes, but I don't know what his role was, and he certainly wasn't assigned to me.
I would like to direct Ms. Schmidt and you to look at Exhibit 10.
Within my materials, at least that Mr. Hicks is a transcript of proceedings in the Alan Freeman case before this commission, and I would object, Madam Chair, to the use of the transcript of the Alan Freeman proceeding here in this proceeding. Ms. Schmidt was not present when that testimony was given. I may or may not have been present because I was in and out of that hearing to observe. I certainly didn't have a chance to ask any questions, cross-examine the witness, and I believe it's contrary to the commission rules and contrary to any kind of fair due process hearing that a transcript from another hearing where Ms. Schmidt wasn't present, I wasn't present, I didn't get a chance to ask questions of the witness that's being proffered here in this hearing.
I would just like to point out that you, just a little bit ago, put forward an affidavit from R.J. Mancini. Okay, and for purposes of this, my reference to a past public record of this commission is that I'm narrowly using it to purely for truth of contents in what was under oath sworn testimony subject to cross-examination in a very narrow context, specifically relating to a representation that was just made by Gene Schmidt.
I'm trying to figure out what,
Please wait until the chairman decides how to rule. And I was saying that in response, Madam Chairman, the Mancini affidavit, as Exhibit 5 reflects, is specifically authorized and sanctioned by a commission rule.
I would state that since you don't have the opportunity to cross-examine the witness that gave this, that I would sustain that.
So again, I'm just going to point out that Stephen Caraway, in sworn testimony,
I'm going to object.
said that the only two races he was involved with in Claremont County were Alan Freeman and Gene Schmidt at the behest of JPL. Again,
Wait,
this
stop.
is under oath sworn testimony, and I'm using it in a very narrow way to just establish that one point of Stephen Caraway himself testified. I would have liked to be able to call Stephen Caraway today, but he had a excused absence rather than having to recuse himself in this matter because he was actually working with Ms. Schmidt.
Okay, I've nicely said that we are sustaining that because he doesn't have the opportunity to cross-examine. There's your latitude that you got with going ahead and making a statement after we asked you not to. So can we please move forward?
Was a statement stricken or is a statement in the record?
It's in the record at this point, but
I would not object to his statement being on the record, you know.
Okay, so the statement that under
Okay,
oath,
you've already stated it, please move
I
forward.
want to make sure we're clear on what statement's in the record.
You made the statement It's on your recording, it's on our recording. It's time to move forward from that. You made this statement very clearly.
Okay. Ms. Schmidt, were you endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party?
Nope.
To your knowledge, do you know why or why not, or was there a process you went through to try to be endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party?
I never went through the process. I wasn't endorsed, nor did I ask for the endorsement.
Do you know who was endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party?
Yes,
Can you say the name of who was endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party?
well, it was Joe Dills, but then he was removed.
Okay. Were you endorsed by the Claremont County Republican Party?
No, I was not.
Okay. Do you know who was?
Joe Dills.
Okay. Were you aware at any point in time, or did you become suspicious at any point in time related to your campaign that there were activities taking place that involved surrogates of Larry Householder that were involved in dark money or non-dark money operations supporting your campaign?
I was not aware of any of it. The only time I knew was when flyers came to my door that were not under my authorization. They were under another authorization. That I cannot control, and had I been able to, I would have stopped it because I didn't like what was being sent.
Were you aware of other people making allegations that those things were happening through the speaker?
I don't understand the question.
I don't know how to say it. Were you aware of other people in the district claiming and asserting that those operations were happening through the speaker?
I'm gonna object.
No. I wasn't aware of that.
Okay. Were you aware of it later?
Who are these people that were objecting? I will object, to this whole line of questioning, Madam Chairman. Some unknown people complaining in a district about flyers on the door,
Mailers, Ron.
mailers, okay.
That, yeah, I mean, unless you can be specific about people and the time frame, you're just saying later, we don't know when later is, we don't know who the people you're speaking of.
So the primary, let's put some context. The primary was originally, what, March 13th or something like that?
March 17th.
March 17th, 2020. It got delayed because of COVID. You know, so at that time, okay, so let's take it in time periods. January, February, March, first quarter of 2020, January, February, March. At any time during that period, were you aware, be concerned, or in any way suspecting that activities were happening without your knowledge, potentially, involving Larry Householder?
No,
Objection.
but the answer is no. I wasn't.
Wait until the chair rules on objection. I think the answer is no, but again,
And I believe she answered that. She answered your question the first time.
The answer is no.
That's what she said.
Okay, so I would like to introduce an exhibit for purposes of challenging what she just said in terms of her knowledge, which is the one that is a Claremont Sun newspaper article that I guess if the other exhibit that I had was disallowed, this would be exhibit number 14. And I'm going to ask her to identify people in the picture in that article, as well as some of the comments. So I believe, Mr. O'Brien, you have a copy of this?
is there an exhibit number, Mr. Hicks?
It's a blank one, but it's a Claremont Sun article at the top. Because these are the ones that I added after the original submission.
Um,
I'm going to object to the document, it's an unmarked exhibit from the Claremont Sun.
All right, so, I mean, at this point, if you could please tell us what this is in relation to in your complaint?
Well, let's remember that I will, okay, if I want the householder operation involved, let me finish.
Well, please answer my question. What?
I'm answering your question, if you let me.
Is this,
Okay, so the householder operation involved activities, as we've already seen in a federal case, that involved discrete activities for campaigns and dark money activities. You've already rolled as much in the Alan Freeman case. You've already rolled as much. So the characters and actors, including some of them that's subject in this, were involved on both sides. She just made the representation that through the first quarter of 2020, she was unaware that there were lots of voices claiming that there were nefarious things going on within the campaigns or within dark money around the campaigns. That is extremely germane because a lot of these resources were involved in both activities simultaneously. Again, as you already ruled before in the Alan Freeman case.
Can you please tell me which complaint this is related to?
This is related to, Ms. Schmidt made the representation to a question I asked, that she was unaware of there being lots of voices and so forth, claiming that there were nefarious things going on with how campaigns were happening in 2020 in the first quarter, January, February, March. She said she was unaware. And I want to help to recollect her memory because I live in the same area she does. And this
How does
article
this relate to the failure to file or include certain information in campaign finance reports, which is what we're here today to presumably find out about?
I think it's going to very clearly establish that there was a pattern of these activities happening on both sides, in the campaign and out of the campaign, involving the same exact resources. And that Ms. Schmidt and others all knew it was going on. Now, ultimately, I can't testify to that. I don't know what she knew and didn't know. But I think if you're going to let her talk about her marathon running and her church attendance, you have to give me a little bit of latitude. How are you going to handle these cases when you get other householder type cases?
But we've asked you to tie it to specific, complaints, and you haven't tied it to the specific complaints.
I think I've tied it again and again.
Okay.
That the same resources, for example, were involved on both sides.
Okay.
It's a little hard to tie it when you're preventing me from asking the line of questioning.
I have not prevented you from anything. You've actually asked, and most have been answered, even to Mr. O'Brien.
Okay, so then I can continue?
No, how does her testimony here specifically relate to
Well,
the
I think
the failure to include certain information
well,
in
on
campaign finance
a
reports?
couple fronts, one would be her honesty. So, Mr. O'Brien stated that, she's a great character. And she knows the rules. That was two exact lines from his opening. Okay? So she just said that she was unaware in January, February, March, that there was lots of voices happening, that there was something nefarious going on with the way campaigns were being funded and the resources were being allocated to them and dark money. That is directly relevant on both fronts. One is because some of the resources were on both sides, including some of the resources that tied to the complaint, but also because she's maintained that she knows the rules and she's a great character, but that she was unaware in the first quarter, January, February, March of 2020, that there was any suspicion of nefarious things going on.
Well, we're here, and we can only deal with the facts. We can only deal with paper, black and white. We cannot, like, her character's not on any kind, that's not how we deal with things. We don't judge her by her character, or your character, or whoever, Mr. O'Brien's character. We can only deal with what is actually presented to us that proves that she has not done what she said she did, or that she did something. If you have proof that she said she paid something and she didn't, that's what we can deal with. I can't look, none of these commissioners can look at her character. She could be the best person in the world, go to mass every Sunday, that doesn't mean anything. What it means to us is we have to have proof in black and white of what you present or what Mr. O'Brien presents on her behalf. That's the only thing that we can deal with. We can talk about character all day long, but that in the end will not help us make a determination on these complaints.
Well, I think believability and credibility is part of the ultimate legal standard that associates with these particular cases. So part of this is believability and credibility, and you have in the preliminary hearing you held that there was probable cause. And I'll look at this one here so I can say the right
I
thing.
object to that statement. You did not find probable cause. You set it over for a hearing because
That's what your actual rules say, is what happens in a preliminary review is that you find probable cause to have a hearing.
Or you can continue it for a hearing to
For
develop
the
additional
record.
facts.
For the record, I never saw that article. And when you live on 4 and 5 hours a night sleep, you don't get to see the news. I don't get the Claremont Sun. I don't get the Cincinnati Enquirer. So how would I have known about it? But secondly, even if I had heard about it as a candidate, I have got to I can't have any knowledge of what's going on outside of my campaign. I can only know what I am doing on my campaign. If dark money, which is being used against me now on another issue, is going on, I don't know about it. And there was not just that as dark money going on in my campaign. There was dark money coming from the Joe Dills campaign. And I'm sure Mr. Dills doesn't know anything about it either. So for you to say that A is B and B is C is an illogical argument, Mr. Hicks. I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea that Mr. Householder was in control of all of that money. None. Got it?
You know, she's
Question,
not
question
responsible
answered.
for C4s that may be advertising in her campaign, nor does she have to report.
Now, by the way, I also think because she answered, I'm allowed to explore the line of questioning.
No, you're not. I'm done.
It's up to the chairman.
We've sustained that, we're gonna move on to the next.
Okay, so I would like her to identify the people in the picture in this article. She's already started answering questions about the article.
Am I in the picture?
We sustained that, we're gonna move on from that, please.
I'm just disturbed by the fact that in the prior hearings, under another chairman, you guys ran this at least with some modicum of following rules and the ability to develop a witness, the ability to establish their character. Okay, that happened to me when I was questioned, and now it's like we're trying to protect something. And I think it's wrong.
I will strongly say, no one's trying to protect anyone. We would like the truth to be shown in the documents that you provided that will support the fact that you have these complaints against Ms. Schmidt. That's all we're trying to do. I'm not here, I'm not an attorney, I'm not trying to run a trial, I'm not, Your Honor, I am just simply trying to run this in the best way that we can so that we get the facts that we need to make a decision. And I'm sorry if that doesn't meet your approval, or you don't feel that that's in the right process, but this is all I can do. I work with Mr. Richter, he is an attorney, he can advise on, on the proceedings, but all I'm trying to do is to get our commissioners the facts that they need to make a decision. So.
Okay. And I think an important part of that is the character representations that are made about the honesty and integrity of filings and the knowing or unknowing aspect. Because we know when we get down the line here, there'll be an aspect, as we saw in the Freeman matter again and again. I didn't know. I was confused. Okay? So when I'm asking questions about these matters, I want to tell the commission, and I would call myself to testify at some point about this, is that within the district, everybody was talking about it. There was a press conference about it. There was an article also in the Enquirer and on all the major TV channels about it.
You're testifying at this point, and that's not what we need to do. She answered the question, she said she didn't know. If you don't believe her, that's on you,
Okay.
however we feel about it, but I'm just saying she's answered the question.
So in January, the answer I heard was that in January, February, March of 2020, you were unaware that there was anything being purported that was nefarious involving the campaigns going on or dark money around the campaigns.
I was unaware. I was too busy door knocking 10
Okay.
to 12 hours a day.
The second quarter, April, May, June. Were you aware at that time, in April, May, June, remember your report was on June 4th. Were you aware at that point in time that there were nefarious things that had gone on relating to on the campaign side with staffing and expenditures and on the dark money side that all revolved around the Larry Householder operation of shared resources?
Not at that time, no.
Okay, so what we're up to, April, May, June, July, August, September.
It was sometime after the election when, it could have been a year after, when they had an article that showed all the connections. But I had no idea what those connections were. I did know there was dark money. I had no idea that dark money was tied directly or indirectly to Mr. Householder, and he is probably going to prison for it.
So wasn't Mr. Householder indicted somewhere around July, mid-July of 2020?
Well, then it could have been then, I don't remember.
Okay.
If he was indicted then and the information came out then, that's when I found out, when he was indicted.
Okay. So when that happened, did you have any discussions with Stephen Caraway
No.
or R.J. Mancini about that?
No,
No discussions whatsoever?
no,
Okay. At any point in time, did you follow up asking about any things that happened? Once you realized some things might have happened in that time period, July, August, any time after that time period, was there any time or any actions you took to try to understand what had happened?
I didn't understand completely what had happened. How would I have known what questions to ask? And besides, I ran my own campaign. There was media, there were mailers, they gave me bills. I paid the bills when they gave them to me. What went on in the background, I would never have had any knowledge of.
Who were they?
Constant Contact, the people that produced the commercials, the people that, the mailers.
Okay. You mentioned earlier Megan Fitzmartin in your testimony.
Yes.
What was your relationship to Megan Fitzmartin and why did you bring up that name?
Megan Fitzmartin would show me the brochures before they were being presented, so that I could make sure that everything was correct on the brochure, the mailer, and the same with the commercial.
Okay. What about Jeff Longstreth? Any association or what's your experience or knowledge of Jeff
I
Longstreth?
had, the first meeting I had with JPL, was with Jeff, and then I didn't have any meetings with him after that.
And what was the content of that meeting?
I don't remember, it was an interview.
An interview to be endorsed by the speaker?
To be put on, an interview for me to be on, to use their services. And it was a back and forth interview. I don't remember the questions.
And what's your knowledge of the role of Constant Content in your campaign?
I didn't know when we got the bill, I did ask, what is this? And they said, that's our bill, it goes on the Constant Content. I had no idea that that was the name of the parent organization or whatever it was.
Had you authorized all those expenditures?
Verbally, yeah. I
Okay,
kept track of what was being spent.
so when you got the bill for $164,000 or what have you, you paid $100,000. Were the expenditures more than you expected, so they exceeded your campaign treasury, so you showed a debt?
Yes, but in fairness, I called them and said, I can't pay it all right now, but I'm going to have a fundraiser, and I had a fundraiser, and I fell about $35,000 short, and so I wrote a personal check to my campaign shown as a debt so that I could pay them, because I wanted to pay all of my debts. And that is perfectly permissible in any campaign. You can show a debt and then pay it off later. I've done it before, and I'll probably do it again. And we reported everything correctly.
Okay. So what was your relationship with R.J. Mancini?
Very little. I mean,
What little it was, what was it?
well, none at all. I mean, I don't know. Did he door knock for me? I don't believe he did. I door knocked for myself. If he did, I didn't know about it.
So if he had testified under oath that he door knocked for you a couple of times, would
I
you?
wouldn't argue it, and then if he got paid, please present me with the bill, and I will pay it. Or please give me the in-kind contribution, and I will pay it.
Was R.J. Mancini able to edit and maintain your Facebook page?
I have no idea.
You don't know who?
Chris, I never touch my Facebook page. Never. I don't even read it. In fact, I don't even have it anymore.
So one of the exhibits in the original complaint was R.J. Mancini's, an email, saying R.J. Mancini, it's exhibit number On my pages, it's exhibit number 29. So it's exhibit number 3. It's within the affidavit, but it's on page 29 within my exhibits. And that's neither one, but I'll give you one. Do you have one of these? Okay, so that, can you just for sake of discussion here, that, who is that note from at the top of page 29? Ms. Schmidt. So at the bottom of the page, there's,
Oh, are you saying?
no, at the bottom of the pages on what I just handed you, there's page numbers.
Page 24?
Yeah, I'm saying go to page 29.
Okay, what is this?
It says exhibit 3 at the top, but that was an exhibit number within the original complaint.
Okay, so I didn't know this.
I didn't ask whether you knew it. I said, who is the note from?
Stephen Caraway?
Okay, and then what does it say? It's only one line, so what's the line say?
I'm adding you to Jean's Facebook page.
And who is it to?
RJ, I guess RJ Mancini.
Okay, so do you, were you aware that Stephen Caraway had maintained your Facebook page, and could you have assign other people to maintain it?
No.
You weren't aware of that?
Stephen Caraway has helped me on my Facebook page since my days in Congress.
So you're aware of anybody that has the right, you said, you already made the representation that you don't maintain your own Facebook page?
No, I don't.
Okay,
In
so
fact,
who do
I
you
don't
think
have-
does? Who do you think does?
Stephen did it as a favor because I don't know how to do it. I don't want to know how to do it. I don't like social media. I find it more not helpful than helpful.
I'd like you to look at exhibit 5 out of your own exhibits, Mr. O'Brien's exhibits. So exhibit 5 is they're a little hard because they're not paginated or stapled, but exhibit 5 is the RJ Mancini affidavit.
Yeah.
So, I just want to make sure. So it should have exhibit 5 at the top, and that doesn't, is she looking at the right thing?
She's looking at the affidavit, it's
Okay.
the item on the end of
Okay.
Exhibit 5, which is what I thought you were
Okay,
addressing.
so, what is that, read the first, is it only one big sentence? So read the affidavit then.
I, Ronald S. Mancini Jr., being first duly sworn, depose and say I was not paid by the Ohio Republican Party to work in the March 2020 primary election on a specific campaign or specific candidate's campaign and was not directed by the Ohio Republican Party or their employees to specifically work or volunteer on the Gene Schmidt campaign for the 2020 primary.
Okay, so you notice there's lots of, I was not specifically. But I think hopefully people here would know that if somebody were compensating me and I went out and worked on different campaigns, I'm responsible for reporting it in kind for that amount. So the wording is very careful in this. So my question for you, Ms. Schmidt, is did, to your knowledge, RJ Mancini have the ability to maintain your Facebook page?
To my knowledge, no.
Okay. Did RJ Mancini door knock for you on multiple occasions?
To my knowledge, no.
Okay. So if I were to say to you that I said and sworn to RJ Mancini, okay, and I just want to make sure I'm correct on this, I'm saying what I said. The only two candidates you worked for were Alan Freeman and Gene Schmidt.
Well, then you can't, if you're saying what you said, and you're reading it in, and he doesn't have the chance to cross-examine,
He can cross-examine me.
then you can't say what RJ Mancini said.
I didn't say what I said. I started by reading what I said. Okay.
I'm
I'm
objecting to the
just-
use of the transcript at all in these proceedings. They're separate proceedings, and he's picking and parsing sections of them, which I thought the chair previously said was improper. And at least if that's still the view of the chair, if we could direct him not to do it on this or any other witness that he may have in those exhibits.
So if I were to tell you that RJ Mancini told me that, in my personal knowledge, that he only worked on your campaign and Alan Freeman's
That's-
campaign, would you have any reason to dispute that?
I'm going to object. He's testifying from his question. Madam Chairman.
That's hearsay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, by the way, on the clock here, so I already expressed early on that I have a hard stop between 1:30
Well, I'm going to
and 2.
object to leaving early before the commission member has to be there at 3:30, as I alluded to earlier, Madam Chairman. This hearing was set because he sued you all, and he's known for weeks that it's set for today, so him scheduling an appointment at 1:30 or 2 is done with the intention of trying to adjourn early. I think we ought to go as long as we can.
Really noted. And we expressed that, you know, we sometimes go past 2 o'clock, so.
Well, I asked before we started this, otherwise I would have asked for a continuance to this whole matter to have this hearing because of walking in here with this utter confusion about discovery. And that's why I'm saying, to me,
Okay,
in Ohio, you know, we have a history of only the feds can deal with these kind of issues. And so this whole thing, I said right when we began this hearing that I had a hard stop at a certain time, and I was acknowledged that that would be respected. The commission itself publishes its meeting times and an end time. And in past hearings that I've been part of, they go over, but they don't go over that much. Okay, they don't go over for hours and hours.
Okay,
And I
well,
think,
that's
again,
not
I would not
up to
have
me.
begun my case. I would have said, let's have a continuance and we'll begin my case at a future time. If I was being told that my upfront telling you that I had to leave between 1:30 and 2 was not going to be respected.
I might say in response, Madam Chairman, that there's been multiple emails between myself, Mr. Hicks, and Mr. Richter for the last 2 weeks on these subjects. Never once did he say he had an appointment later this afternoon. He said it this morning at 11 o'clock or whenever.
all right. So, would you like to move forward?
I'm going to keep questioning Ms. Schmidt, but all I did was observe that we're getting close to the time window I had provided, and I thought that this commission consented to at the beginning of this.
I don't believe the commission consented. I mean, you certainly stated it. We indicated that one of the members had a hard out at 3:30.
At which time I specifically,
But, you know, the commission is here to hear this case, and it will sit as long as necessary to hear the case. That's been our history. You know, I don't think we've ever stopped a hearing because one of the parties had an issue with timing. When a party comes and represents themselves before the commission, they're here until the commission decides to stop.
okay, I just feel like the rules are very variable here. So I would have asked for continuance at the beginning if I understood when I asked, and people acknowledged that I said I had a 1:30 to 2 o'clock timeout for me. That's an hour longer than your scheduled hearing time.
When you say our scheduled time, if you're talking about what Mr. Hicks or Mr. Hughes puts on a Teams meeting time, it's because we're obligated to put a time out there. The commission started this meeting at 10 a.m. and it goes until the commission decides it's going to stop. That's been the history of the commission. Because we have a Teams meeting out there that may state a time, I don't think you'll look at any of the notices that the commission sends out that identifies any kind of a time frame for when a meeting will end.
Well, that's what it says online, but I'm just very frustrated by the notion that the body that's supposed to stand for clean campaign finance is constantly, like, I don't know person like me, I don't know what the rules are when I come in here. Discovery, not discovery. We don't follow our rules. We don't change the OIC. We do this, we don't. We vote unanimously against denying a discovery motion. This becomes kangaroo when a person has no understanding of what the actual rules of procedure are, timelines, anything. This is the reason Mr. O'Brien has multiple times expressed that you're here because I filed a mandamus action. Damn right I filed a mandamus action. After 20 months from when this was held over for a full hearing. Help me to understand, and help Ohioans understand why in 20 months this was not scheduled for a full hearing. What I understand is kangaroo. And so I've expressed on the record up front that I had a hard stop between 1:30 and 2.
And at that time, I said we have a hard stop at 3:30, and that we oftentimes go very late because we hear the cases until the completion.
Can we just move on? We're wasting time.
Okay, I'd like to request a continuance of this case
I would
in
object.
respect of the schedule that I set before we ever began testimony.
I object.
Like I said, I know the history of the commission has been to stop when a commission member has to end it in proceedings, but beyond that, we proceed until the commission's done. It's up to the commission whether they want to continue the matter or not. I certainly wouldn't be inclined.
No, the respondent's here and wanting to go forward as far as we can.
Part of the matter is, did I pay bills when I got them? The answer,
I respect what you're saying. I respect what you're saying. We always respect what you're saying, Mr. Hicks. At this point, I guess it is up to the commission whether we want to continue this matter, or whether we would, please, hold on. Or whether we want to continue until our commission member has to leave.
I'd like to move that we proceed with the hearing that is currently being undertaken.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Yes.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question about the nature of the appointment? Because if my memory serves me right, you were asking questions exceeding the time frame in which you said you had to be in an appointment. We're often pretty compassionate body. If it was something medical or maybe somebody had passed away, something that couldn't be rescheduled. Just curious about the nature of the appointment that you needed to leave for.
So just by clarification, I said that I needed to leave between 1:30 and 2 to get back to Cincinnati for a Zoom call relating to a condominium I have in Florida that was heavily damaged by Hurricane Ian. Okay, so that is the reason where my wife wants me to be there with her. So we suffered some significant damage during Hurricane Ian. There's something that I want to be personally part of. My wife wants me to be there with her. And that's the nature of my request, and why I brought up that I had a hard stop between 1:30 and 2 to be able to get back in time for 4 o'clock.
For the record, I'd say I can do a Zoom call on my telephone, and if his wife has a mobile telephone, they can both be on the same Zoom call at the same time, with him here in Columbus and her in Cincinnati. And that also could have been rescheduled with sufficient notice, and Mr. Richter could have been advised about it 2 weeks ago.
With all due respect, he was asked, he answered, and I think our opinions on the rest, notwithstanding. So we do have a motion on the floor. We've heard the reasoning. Mr. Hicks would like to get back.
Madam Chair, just a question, because I know that the motion's on the floor, but we do have a commission member who is not going to be here for the duration of this hearing, because I don't believe it's going to end by 3:30. I mean, not where we are right now. So, that, we're gonna have to continue it at some point in time anyway. If Mr. Hicks still has more questions, and then Mr. O'Brien certainly has the opportunity to present his case.
But at this point, it's, you know, a decision made by the body. I don't have the power to, you know, really decide that. We do have a motion on the floor, hearing the answer, hearing Ms. Tavares, Commissioner Tavares's concerns.
Could I have a clarification what Ms. Tavares said about other commission members won't be available for a future meeting?
No, that wasn't
Oh.
about a future meeting, it was about today.
Oh,
That
I
was
see.
To end by a certain time for
Okay,
one of our commissioners.
sure.
I would just like to add that I also have a schedule, and I had obligations downstairs that I missed for this. I don't know what my future schedule is going to be. In fairness for all of us, we're all busy. I really would appreciate trying to get this resolved today. I will gladly answer any question that you have, Mr. Hicks. Can we just move forward?
At least limited to the charges he's leveled against Ms. Schmidt.
By the way, if it helps the board to Ms. Tavares' remarks, I plan on calling myself at a minimum. Okay, so the statement that we're gonna be done by 3:30, I think is a prudent statement, but that's not realistic because I'm gonna call myself as a witness. And I'm probably only 60% through the questions I had for Ms. Schmidt. We basically spent, you know, like 10, 12 minutes now because I just brought up, because I looked at my watch, that it was getting within the window of the time frame that I had mentioned.
I guess my question would be, if you knew you had that hard out, I mean, I think, and you, then with the amount of questions you have, why did we proceed at this point?
Because my experience with this commission, for example, in the Freeman matters, we had 3 days of hearings. So it was not a one, so it's kind of like this, I didn't even know for sure we're gonna have a hearing today because this whole thing with discovery.
Okay.
And I just want to point out, I'm just a citizen of Ohio. I'm not a politico. I'm not being paid by anybody. I don't make anything from this. And I just love to document what happens when you do this. And when you bring something forward, and I think this commission should be more respectful of the citizens that bring, this should be the most important type of complaint this commission hears. When a citizen takes the time to bring something forward and invest a lot of time in researching it, it should be given some level of respect.
And I believe it has. I believe we are very, very respectful. You know, we always hear you out. We give you the latitude you request. Please. Just the same respect back to us is all I guess we would ask. So there's a motion on the floor. If someone would like to, I mean, there's not been a second to it. So that's where we're at this time. Mr. Commissioner Knight asked that, when he made the motion that we continue, Ms. Tavares, you know, expressed concern. So where are we at with that?
If there's no second, we can just go to the motion dies for lack of a second, and then go forward from there.
All right, so the motion is died for lack of a second. So at this point, we proceed. So please
Okay.
continue.
And I just want to, I appreciate,
One point of, just want to make sure I was motioning that we continue today, that we go
Okay.
forward.
Right, correct.
So if that's not approved, why are we proceeding? I don't understand. Are we continuing the case?
Yes, no, we're actually going forward right now. Are you saying you want to continue the case?
No, I wanted to go forward now.
That's what we're doing, yeah.
I guess we didn't vote yes, so. Is
It
he-
died, there was no second.
Oh,
So
okay,
Mr.
just
Hicks-
make sure I understand what happened, okay.
Yeah, Mr. Hicks is going to continue right now.
okay. And I just want to make the comment, I appreciate your statement of respect back and forth, but I want to remind you that until this morning, a motion that I filed 14 months ago and repeatedly asked for it to be scheduled for a motion hearing, a motion that I came, as some of you remember, back in September and stood up and read through all the open cases where I was given time, I appreciate, to speak. So I just want to make sure that your perception of respect back and forth might be different than mine. Because I shouldn't be having to stand here, you know, the commission had 20 months, 14 months on a motion for discovery to resolve those issues so it could be done. But I'm left in the lurch where I come here today and I don't know what we're doing.
Mr. Hicks, please, that's not forwarding this case at all. And I think that if we are really trying to make sure that we move forward with this case, that's been noted several times. So can we please move forward with your questions for Ms. Schmidt, please?
For Cuba. Okay, so I said that this commission's like Cuba. I want to make sure I'm clear on that,
Thank you.
okay?
Please move forward with the questions.
So, all right, so let me look at my notes here. I would like to look at the, I want to direct another question relating to the affidavit of Mancini. So do you still have that before you, Ms. Schmidt? Did you consult with Mr. Mancini on this affidavit at all?
Nope.
Okay. Would you say that the affidavit is vague because it never says he didn't work on your campaign, it just says he was specifically not
I
assigned?
don't, no, I can't comment on that, I didn't write it.
Affidavit speaks for itself as well.
Well, how do you interpret that? Do you interpret this as
My
a,
interpretation is not important on this. Next question.
how do you interpret this affidavit? Do you interpret it as him saying that he did not work on your campaign?
I can't interpret this, I didn't write it. Next question.
Well, you can read it, can't you?
I read it, I didn't
She's
write
answered.
it. Writing and reading are two different things. Next question.
Do you interpret it as meaning that he didn't work on your campaign at all?
I have no comment.
You have no comment, okay. I want to direct you to the other exhibit that your counsel provided, which is Rob Shakur's affidavit. What number is that in your exhibit, Ron?
I believe it's attached to Exhibit 4, which is the motion to dismiss that was filed.
Okay. Do you have a copy of that before you? Did you give her a copy of your?
Sure.
So this is Rob Shakur's affidavit. Could you read the second paragraph of the
The
affidavit?
Ohio Republican Party did not specifically assign R.J. Mancini or any other person to specifically work or volunteer on the Gene Schmidt campaign for state representative in the March 2020 Republican primary.
Would you interpret this as saying that Mancini did not work for your campaign?
I can only look at the words on the page. I can't make any assumptions beyond the words on the page.
So this affidavit tied out to, I think Mr. O'Brien pointed out, it tied out to your motion to reconsider, is that correct?
Dismiss.
Okay. But so that was after my complaint, and that this affidavit was brought forth. Given the nature of my complaint, do you have any knowledge as to why it didn't just specifically disclaim that R.J. Mancini worked for your campaign?
I didn't write it. I can't make an assumption.
Well, but you, through your counsel, put it before this commission.
She answered your
I
question.
answered the question, move on.
No, okay, I understand you're frustrated, but you have to be respectful. Thank you.
Okay, so did you, after your motion to reconsider or motion to dismiss failed, did you make any attempt yourself to clarify with R.J. Mancini a black and white answer as he did or did not work on your campaign?
No,
Why not?
I had no communication with him.
That's, you already said that. You didn't do it. So I'm asking, why didn't you do it?
I never talked to him. I mean, I don't know why. I didn't talk to him. I didn't do it. I didn't.
She's answered the question.
Well, I don't think she had, because
Okay, I did not talk to him personally. never talked to him personally about whether he worked on my campaign or he didn't work on my campaign. I had no knowledge that he was working on my campaign. So how would I know to ask the question if I didn't know he was doing the work?
Well, did you have knowledge that he had been working on your campaign after my complaint?
No.
So when you got my complaint, did you make any attempts, so the complaint alleged some very specific things. Did you make any attempt to clarify with the parties that were involved in the complaint, particularly R.J. Mancini and Stephen Caraway, what the truth was in terms of their, what the truth was?
I hired an attorney.
So when I filed a complaint, and I'll just use one of the examples, that R.J. Mancini had worked for your campaign and been compensated by the Ohio Republican Party and was not disclosed on your campaign finance reports as an in-kind or any kind of contribution, your answer to that wasn't to call R.J. Mancini and ask him if he had worked on your campaign and to clarify his payroll status. Your reaction was to hire an attorney?
Mr. Hicks, knowing your past history, I called an attorney.
Since you brought up my past history, what's your view of my past history?
That's,
No
Objection.
comment. I have no comment.
that would,
No comment.
What did you mean by knowing my past history? What specific events will cross
I
your
have
mind?
no comment.
Well, objection to any questions.
She mentioned it. It's a fair question, given that she mentioned, given my past history, I'm asked, what is the basis for that?
I have no
Statement.
comment.
I'd like the witness to answer the question. When she
I
referred
did.
to
I
my
have
past
no-
history, what was she
I have
referring
no
to?
comment.
It wasn't answered. She
it's
just
the
made
answer
the,
she's gonna give you.
well, you can
That's her.
compel her to answer.
She said she had no comment on your past history and what she thinks about it.
No, she made a statement, is given my past history. And I asked, what events in my past history crossed her mind when you made that statement? That's a totally fair and germane question. She's the one who said it.
And she also said she has no comment. She's answered that 3
That's
times.
not I don't think that's a court legal answer. No comment. I'd like to be being questioned as a witness and be able to just say no comment to random questions. Can you name any events in my history that caused you to just say, given my history?
Objection again on what she may think about Mr. Hicks's past history. It's irrelevant. At least I understood the rules of evidence up through the OAC are applying here, and what she thinks about him is irrelevant.
I didn't ask what she thinks about me. I asked, she brought up what she thinks about me, and I asked what were, name an event in my history that she's crossed her mind.
Please move on, Mr. Hicks. How does that relate to whether there are campaign finance reporting inaccuracies or incomplete information?
Because, Mr. Richter, I'm directly following up on her statement that when she had the opportunity to contact R.J. Mancini to find out what actually happened, instead she hired a lawyer. That was her representation, not mine.
But what does that have to do with anything, with asking the question that you're asking now?
I think it's important to understanding her mental state related to this whole set of things and her ability, her credibility as a witness.
I think the objection was sustained. Move on.
Okay. So, when did you receive a bill from Constant Content?
Which time?
The one that related to $164,000.
It's in the document.
The bill is? I didn't see the bill in there.
What? What's the?
You had a bill in your documents relating to the second pass, when David Goldstein collected the debt, there was a bill from Constant Content and Materials, but not for the first pass, the $164K. Yes, and in his Exhibit 7, there's an invoice from Constant Content dated 11/4/2020, but that's for the second thing. That's for the 20,260. I asked about the first one, the 164,000.
I paid the bill, I'm presuming, very shortly after I received it. My track record is to pay the bills when I receive them.
So, when was the check written?
April 2nd, 2020.
April 2nd.
Okay, so you believe, I don't have that in front of me, but I'll take that as, so you believe that the invoice was somewhere around shortly before April 20th?
April 2nd.
April 2nd, I'm sorry, April 2nd of 2020? In that payment, okay.
Within probably 24, 48 hours.
Okay, within 24 to 48 hours. So you think it was, did you pay it or did your husband pay it?
Peter paid it.
But you reviewed it prior to him paying it?
Yes,
Okay. When I filed my complaint, one of the items within it had to do with Stephen Carraway. What did you do to try to confirm with Stephen Carraway if he had been paid or not relating to helping you with your campaign?
I chose not to discuss those things because knowing it was a complaint, it was better to hire a lawyer and let the legal process do its work.
Did you instruct your lawyer to reach out to either Mr. Mancini or Mr. Carraway in relation to their role in your campaign and payment?
I don't know. I don't remember. I doubt it, but I don't know. I turned it over to Mr. O'Brien and he handled everything.
So Mr. O'Brien made the assertion up front, I wrote it down, about your character and that you're a person who knows the rules.
I do. I know that you have to pay the bills that are presented. I know that you have to do them in a timely fashion. I know that there is a process that the state requires you to do that. I understand the disclosure issues involved. Yes, I do know those rules, Mr. Hicks.
So what are the rules about in-kind contributions?
If you have received an invoice for an in-kind contribution, you are obliged to report it.
So you believe that within the rules that if you don't receive an invoice of an in-kind contribution that you're aware of, you don't need to report it?
If you are aware of an in-kind contribution, then yes, you have to report it. I was not aware that those kinds, I don't believe that anybody was door knocking for me to begin with, because I did it myself. But if there was some sort of activity going on, I clearly didn't know it. But had I been given an invoice on either paying for it or an in-kind contribution, I would have reported it. I can't report what I don't know. That is illegal for me to do that.
That was a very common refrain from Alan Friedman. I can't report what I don't know, and I think one of the things that came up with that was the obligation of a candidate to take reasonable steps to know, and that they can't hide behind ignorance. So once you became aware of my complaint and the allegations within it, and conceptually you might have been aware of, because Mr. O'Brien said he was watching the Freeman hearings last night, you might be aware of testimony that people gave under oath. What steps did you take, your husband, or that you're aware of, to try to determine, was there an in-kind contribution amount that you should show on your campaign finance for either Stephen Carraway or R.J. Mancini?
At the time of the election, I had no knowledge that they were doing anything that I needed to have some sort of a payment for an in-kind contribution to be reported. To this day, I still don't know whether they had done anything that needed to be reported or not. I received a complaint via Mr. Hicks on this. I hired Mr. O'Brien as my legal counsel. I'm here today to tell you that, and the difference between myself and Mr. Freeman is I did pay the bills when they were presented. I didn't not pay a bill because I didn't want to, or because I didn't know about it as his claim. I was presented bills from Constant Content, and I paid those bills. I had no knowledge that there might have been activity out there that I should have been reporting, because nobody presented that to me. I cannot, I'm going to say this again, I cannot put something down in a report if I don't know what the amount is or what the activity is. It is illegal for me to make an assumption.
So you stated earlier that you talk to Stephen Caraway almost every day,
Yes,
okay? In the 20 months since my complaint, did you ever ask Stephen Caraway to present to you any appropriate bill for any in-kind accounting for monies he was paid to work with your campaign?
he is a friend. Our relationship is very special. Whatever he did, he would do out of friendship, as a volunteer, as somebody that wants to help me, just as I would do it for him.
So the question though is, did, during all these almost daily conversations, okay, once my complaint, not back in the campaign, but once my complaint was there, you never took the time to ask Stephen Caraway in your daily conversations, were you compensated for the campaign help that you provided?
She answered that. She said no.
I would like,
She said no at the very
I
beginning.
said no, and it is no.
She answered that.
so you, okay, okay, and you never contacted or had anybody contact RJ Mancini?
I would object, anybody could be counsel, and counsel is something that may well have done that.
And she answered that. She said no.
So,
Mr. Hicks, she said no several times.
okay,
I mean, it's on record. She said no.
okay. So, again, I asked the question because I don't think there was an answer as to why didn't you ask? Being that you're an experienced candidate with an unbelievable resume who knows the rules according to your counsel, why didn't you ever bother to ask?
When you are in a lawsuit, I'm usually advised to say nothing to anyone except through your attorney regarding the lawsuit. I looked at this in the same manner. You don't go out and talk about it. You don't say, hey, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do this? You let the legal process go forth. And so, no, I didn't ask him about it.
So if I told you that I think that most candidates, when confronted with an Ohio Election Commission complaint, will take remedial steps if necessary to fix and refile their campaign finance reports, would you dispute that?
I'm going to object. Mr. Hicks earlier spoke for everybody in Claremont County and now is speaking for all candidates in his question. If he wants to ask it differently, that might be appropriate.
So do you think that, Ms. Schmidt, do you think that when candidates face election commission complaints, that one of their first courses of action should be to correct any deficient reporting in good faith?
I think the prudent thing is to seek legal counsel. And then, on the advice of legal counsel, make the necessary steps if there are necessary steps to make.
Would you give that advice to all levels of the political spectrum, down to somebody running for township trustee or school board, that they should get legal
Absolutely.
counsel? So if their board of election calls them up and asks them about a discrepancy, this happens in Claremont County, I'm sure you're aware. the candidate's response when the Board of Elections points out a discrepancy and asks for a correction should be to get legal counsel?
Object, that isn't what she testified to.
Well, what did you testify to clarify?
The question
The question
related
you
to a
asked.
complaint filed with this elections commission.
I think we can, that's speculating on coulda, woulda, shoulda. I think we should stick to what your experience was and what you have experience with her on, or as it relates to your complaints, please.
I think it's important to understand the context of somebody saying that when confronted with these things, their course of action was to not clarify them.
My course of action was to seek legal counsel.
For the fifth time, for the record.
Okay. So can you describe for me how the David Goldstein invoice came about?
It was a registered letter in the mail.
But was that letter in your exhibits?
I don't know, I don't think so.
I don't think it's, was it drawn in your exhibits?
It was a
Right now,
registered letter in the mail.
The Goldstein stuff is Exhibit 7, and it's an email to the Secretary of State. It's a email from Mr. Goldstein to Peter Schmidt, and it's an invoice or a revised invoice for $20,260.
The first one,
And then a check that was
A check.
immediately written and reported.
So you're referring to Exhibit 7, right, Mr.
Correct.
O'Brien?
Correct.
So the second page of that I directed the commission to and Ms. Schmidt to. It's not numbered and it has super lawyers at the bottom. It says super lawyers.
oh yeah,
Ms. Schmidt, who's that a note from?
David Goldstein,
Who's it to?
Peter Schmidt,
What's Peter Schmidt's role in relation to your
he's
campaign?
my campaign treasurer.
And could you read, it's very short, so can you read the,
I am attaching the revised invoice based on our agreement to settle the matter. Please issue a check made payable to David Goldstein, LPA, in the amount set forth in the attached invoice. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to call me.
okay? And then the next page, the invoice itself,
Yeah,
what's, I may have to read it, but what's the amount on there?
$20,260.
So since the note refers to a revised invoice, what was the original invoice?
I can't remember what the original was, but there was no verification of what the activities were. And so we asked for a revision, and this is what they could substantiate, that the activities that were done were done.
And how did they substantiate that the activities that were done were done?
I don't know. We established, I don't know, they were very sketchy on how they gave me the first invoice and the second invoice. It was just, you owe this amount. And I said, what? Tell me what I owe. And so they said they verified the 20,000 was what they could verify that I owe. That's what I paid.
And what was that for?
I have no idea.
Well, you're, okay.
They just said, well, yeah.
So I want to,
I would assume that it was for mailings, but I don't know. I mean, getting something 17 months after the election, saying you owe an amount, I wouldn't just write the check. I'd try to figure out what was going on. And so they said, this is what Constant Content or whatever it was said you owed, and I said, okay, I'll pay it. And I wanted to get it resolved as quickly as I could, and it took months for Goldstein to get back with me on the actual amount that was owed.
so you're saying that, I thought you said that you got the invoice, was that the first invoice you said you paid within hours, the 164,
Yes,
you know, within a day or two, whatever. I'm not-
couple of days.
Okay, so the second invoice, you're saying there was something presented and months went by before?
Okay. Imagine getting a door knock at the mail, and you open it up and it says you owe this amount of money. And you go, I don't know what this is for. So you call the law firm. The law firm takes days to get back with you, and then they say, well, we'll get back with you. And I kept calling them. In fact, I asked Mr. O'Brien to cattle prod this, because I didn't want this to drag out as long as it did. And I finally called him and said, look, we're resolving this before the first of the year. Do you understand me? You tell me what I owe, you tell me what it's for, I'll pay it. And that's exactly what they did. They said they gave me the amount and I said I will pay it.
So,
I can't pay what, I have an obligation to make the right payment. And that's what I did. I wanted verification on the first statement that they gave. What do I legitimately owe? They came up with the second one, and I paid it, and it took them that long, Chris. I didn't drag it out. I want it resolved immediately.
so I want to make sure I understand the progression here because, and I'll lay out the invoices just to be clear. So there was invoice 1, which was for $164,000 that you paid within hours or a day or some
Right.
very quick period of time.
Yes,
Then there was invoice 2.
You paid 100,000 of it.
100,000 of them, yes.
Correct.
Okay, so there's invoice 1 that your payment of 100,000 and your recognition of the debt was almost immediate from when you received the invoice. You got, I'm gonna say there's 3 invoices. And just I wanna make sure we're all saying the same things. So invoice 2 would have been a first version of a Goldstein invoice. And then per the note, there was some revised invoice later that I assume this was what was invoice 3, which was an invoice as a result of an agreement to settle the matter. Is that, do we all understand, and do you
Yes.
understand that? Is that a correct characterization?
with a 16-month delay, knowing that Mr. Longstreth faced criminal activity, I wasn't so quick to pay the second bill. I wanted to make sure I really did owe it. And when they finally showed me that I really did owe 20,000, whatever it was, I immediately paid the bill. First, we called the elections, the Secretary of State, to find out how to pay it, who to pay it to, and how to report it. And once that was done, then we paid it. Because I wanted to do it accurately and correctly.
Thank you.
So the first page, do you have these in front of you? It'd be good if she had in front of her the exhibits we're talking about.
Is that 7? or
Yeah,
9?
first page is 7, I'm just on 7.
Oops. This one, Mr. Katz, I am Peter Schmidt, treasurer for my wife, Jean.
I didn't ask you to read it, but if you want to, you can.
Okay, what do you want to know about it?
So it's, who's it from?
It's from my husband to Mr. Katz.
That's not what I read.
Isn't this what you wanted?
Yeah, but who does it say the from is? It's your exhibit, not mine.
Oh, Schmidt for Ohio disputed debt. Is that what you want me to say? What
Do you
want me
understand
to
the
say?
word from? So who does it say that it's from? Top line.
Oh, Jean Schmidt. Well, my husband did it.
Okay. And when's it dated?
Because it says at the end, regards, Jean Schmidt.
So by the way, because I'm exploring these a little bit just for clarification for you and for everybody, this is the first time I've seen these. Okay? So it's dated January 31, 2022, correct?
Yes.
Okay. It says here that you spoke to Brian Katz.
Yes.
Or why don't you read that sentence where it says, she told me she.
I am Peter Schmidt, treasurer for my wife, Jean Schmidt's campaign, Schmidt for Ohio. She told me she spoke with you on Saturday, 1/29/22, regarding our disputed debt with David Goldstein, LPA, and constant contact. We have settled the debt, and it will be reported on our 2022 pre-primary report. The invoice was dated 11/4/2020, but we never received anything until 8/6/2021. I have amended our 2020 post-general 2020 annual and 2021 semi-annual to reflect the debt. The debt is also listed on our 21 annual report that I just filed. We want to be in compliance. Please let me know if there's anything else we need to do. Now, I had had prior conversations with Mr. Katz on how to do this long before my husband sent this email. Prior. One of the things that the Secretary of State will not do, are very cautious about doing, is putting anything in writing. They basically tell you everything over the phone and you have to copy it down. But we put this in writing to document the fact that we really have been trying to pay this debt and trying to do it correctly and consistently with the law. But the Secretary of State will not put anything in writing to you.
Thank you.
So my experience, I get to a question here, having asked the Secretary of State questions, not as elaborate as this, is that the response I get back both verbally and in writing is, we don't give out legal advice. Okay, and that they tell you, we can't, they almost relentlessly do so, tell you, we don't give out legal advice, you have to seek your own counsel and make your determinations based on your counsel. So what was, so you, did you call, what was remember, that's the first time I've ever seen this. So you had a call with Mr. Katz on a Saturday, according to this, 1/29/2022. So that was on a personal mobile, or was he in the office that day?
No objection, Your Honor, in terms of, how she talked to him on a mobile on a Saturday.
I think I can ask how the conversation took place that's in your exhibit. I'm asking questions about your exhibit.
The exhibit speaks for itself.
Can as I've said, we had multiple conversations. I do not believe they were on a mobile. I think they were in the office. And I may have left him a message saying, you've got to help us with this. And he may have called me back on a Saturday. As other people in the governor's office call me on matters on a Saturday. That is not out of the ordinary to have happen. That wasn't the first time I had contacted Mr. Katz. We wanted to get it done right. And you're correct, they say they won't give you legal advice. But I say, well, where do I put this on here? Go look here, go look here, go look here.
Did you at any time contact anybody, or I know you don't file there, but anybody in the Claremont County Board of Elections?
No.
Okay. And so how often do you talk to Mr. Katz?
Well, the only time I talked to him was during this issue.
Okay. And you believe he was in the office when he talked to you on
I
the
have no
Saturday?
idea how he talked to me. I didn't pay attention.
Well, I thought, I'm just answering, you just said that. You said you thought office. I'm just asking you to clarify.
I don't know. I don't know whether he called me on a mobile or on his office phone. I didn't pay attention to the call.
Who initiated the call?
I initiated the call.
So it wasn't him responding to a voicemail?
No, I initiated the call through the Secretary of State's office.
So you dialed the Secretary of State office number or his personal number?
The
Or you don't
Secretary-
remember?
No. Eventually I had his direct line, I'm sure, but no.
Okay. So if I go off of this, I'm trying to piece together the sequences of these events. And I'm going to write it down here. So the first invoice for the $164,000, which is not in an exhibit, would have been somewhere around, what was it, April 20th?
April 2nd.
Second, I'm sorry, I keep doing that, that's my bad. I keep saying 20th.
April
Okay,
2020.
okay. So that was the first invoice. So let me see if I can ascertain from this, when was the second invoice? So the second invoice, it says 8/6/2021 on here.
That was the disputed invoice.
So the second invoice that was for whatever became the $20,000 payment was 8/6/2021?
Yes.
Do you have that invoice?
I don't know.
Does your husband have that
I
invoice?
don't know.
Okay. And then the third invoice was when?
Sometime before Christmas. We wanted it resolved, we wanted it paid.
When you spoke to Mr. Katz on the 29th of, hold on here, let me look at this, I'm getting confused on the dates here. So if I get this right, and it might help me, it might help the commission members also, the first invoice that was the 164 was 4/2/2020. Second invoice was 8/6/2021, based on this note, based on Exhibit 7. And the third invoice was January 27th, 2022, based also on this exhibit. It's your exhibit. Yeah, I don't know why you don't have it in your hand, because it's your
Well, then
exhibit.
I would,
You're reading it, Mr. Hicks, for the
so
record,
if
it
it was
speaks for
January
itself.
instead of
Well, but I'd like to
December.
have, for purposes of making sure that the witness doesn't then claim I didn't understand what was being asked or any confusion, it'd be good if she actually had the exhibits in her hands that we're talking about. I think that would be normal to
Can I
do.
have this, whatever he's talking about that?
And it's the email from Peter to Mr. Goldstein.
Okay.
On the 31st.
So then we paid it on the 31st. I'm not the treasurer, I know we paid it.
Okay, so in those 3 days, so the difference between the second one, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1.
Mrs. Katz says I need Goldstein's.
It's 5, would it be correct by your calculation, Ms. Schmidt, that it's 7 months, 7.5 months from when you received the second invoice until the third invoice? Or the third invoice.
This isn't
It's Exhibit 7, I'm still referring to Exhibit 7.
exhibit. I believe we paid it before January 31st. But Mr. Schmidt had to report the payment. And so the reporting of the payment will be a delay in time from when you've actually paid it to when you report the payment on your filing. So if memory serves me correct, we paid that before 2022. Sometime at Christmas, we,
Yeah,
okay, we actually paid that on, what date is that? No, that's,
The report filed with the Secretary of State's
This
office
is the
that's
one.
attached to that same exhibit.
this is the one, this is the 2020, we need the other one.
Let me see what's happening.
Show me what it says.
my question though wasn't about the payments, my question was about the invoices.
Okay,
So if we don't have forestall analysis of the payments, I can re-ask my question about the invoices. And I made a computational error on my part when I said that, kind of like my April 2nd, April 20th computational error, is that the second invoice was August 6th, 2021. The third invoice was 1/27/2022. Both of those were based on Exhibit 7, your exhibit, and that means there was 5.5 months. I said 7, but it's 5. It was 5.5 months between when you got the invoice on August 6th, 2021, and when you paid the invoice, not pay, sorry,
Report.
retract. Right, there's an email that you acknowledge and accept the invoice on January 27th. And then you talk to the Secretary of State, Mr. Katz, on how it should be reported on your campaign finance on the 29th.
I'm not, I don't know when we paid it, I know that we paid it as
I
soon
didn't
as.
say paid it.
I'm still not understanding what you're saying with the invoice, but I'll say you're correct, I don't know.
Well, see, this is why I like you to have the exhibits in your hand, so you
Well,
can't later say
I'm-
you're
I'm not
confused about what you were
understanding the
answering.
question with the
Well,
exhibit.
yeah, and I don't understand your
I don't
question.
understand your question with the exhibit, where's
There
the,
was no second
I'm
invoice
asking you to
until there was
confirm.
a revised invoice.
I'm asking you to confirm, I'm
Where's
just
the
asking you to
check?
yes or no
Where's the
confirm that I have this down
$20,000
correctly, it's not
where's the
hard.
$20,000 check?
Not talking about the payments, I'm still talking about the invoices.
We paid it on January 28th. So my assumption would be, and it's an assumption and I shouldn't do that, is that we got the invoice quickly before that. And we paid it. because I wasn't gonna wait around them.
So again, you're answering a
So
question
it's 5
different than I
months,
asked.
but Mr. Hicks, it wasn't my fault that it was this late. It was Goldstein's fault that it was this late. I couldn't get him to move on it.
All I asked was that you confirm that the dates I laid out were correct as to
The
the
dates are
invoices.
correct.
Okay, so 4/02/2020 for the first one, 164,000. 8/6/2021 for the second invoice that was disputed by you. And then January 27th, 2022 for the third invoice. And on January 29th, 2022, you spoke to Mr. Katz about how to report it.
Yes,
Okay. What do you remember anything about the August 6th, 2021 invoice?
no, only that it came certified.
Do you remember generally the amount of that invoice?
No.
What took place that you're aware of is a negotiation to come to, as it says in Mr. Goldstein's note, a revised invoice based on our agreement to settle the matter?
That they could document a few some mailers that were sent out. That's the only thing that they could document.
And you said you don't know what that invoice was for.
3 times she said it for the record.
She's answered that.
Okay. I'm just confused because you said it was a disputed invoice, you questioned what it was about, and went through a 5.5-month process. And when I ask you right now, do you know what the invoice was for, you're saying you don't know.
She said disputed mailers.
Disputed mailers. Okay?
So the testimony is that the invoice was for mailers?
That's what they said at the second. Goldstein said it was for mailers. I didn't have it in writing that it was for mailers. He said it was for mailers.
Okay. So I'd like to introduce this exhibit, which is a note that Mr. O'Brien sent me on May 3rd. It's in your stack. It stands out by the color of the type being different.
Is there an exhibit number?
No, because it's one of the added ones. So since it's theoretically, if we ever get one of my exhibits added, it'd be number 14, because that's the next number in my stack. It's the one that's your note, you might recognize it. That I'm colorblind, so the blue type or purple type or whatever it is. Have you found it?
I found a blue email from me to you, but Ms. Schmidt's not copied on it, so I don't know how she would have knowledge of it.
I don't know that could be a question for her, of did she have knowledge of it, right, Ron?
What is it? Did you write it?
I see.
I don't know what Mr.
Can we just get her the exhibit?
Okay, can I just say this? I did ask Mr. O'Brien, when I couldn't get any resolution with Mr. Goldstein, to contact him.
So hold on, I'm gonna hold on this exhibit for a second. So somewhere between 8/6 and 1/27, you did ask Mr. O'Brien to contact Mr. Goldstein?
I'm going to object to communications between council.
She just put it on the floor, she said it.
Well, you said it was to him. I don't understand what this is. Is this blue thing, Mr. Beatty and Mr.
Can I
Goldstein?
finish I don't know what the witness is doing right now,
Well,
she
this
just,
is what I was just handed. I don't know.
Madam Chair, I don't know what
Okay.
what Mr. Hicks is
Okay.
doing, what his question
All right,
is.
stop. Okay. She has the email in her hand. It's the email you're referencing, correct?
Mr. Richter and
Yes.
Mr. Hicks?
Okay, so what is your question?
so, but now I wanna ask another question, because before she looked at the exhibit, so this question is not related to that exhibit. You volunteered some additional information.
Well, sure, I would contact my attorney.
You,
That's
no, hold on,
fine.
let me ask the question.
Okay,
I haven't asked the question, okay? You volunteered some additional information. that you had in fact instructed Ron O'Brien to contact David Goldstein over the disputed invoice.
Yes, because they wouldn't call me back.
Okay, but I want to ask about that because that's new information. You didn't say that before. That's something that you said,
It's attorney-client privilege, but it is a record.
but you just revealed it. It's not
Okay.
privilege when you reveal it.
Stop, well, we're not gonna do this. First of all, we need to level our voices and be respectful of one another. Please ask your question, allow him to finish, and then ask your question, or answer the question as it's asked, but like, can we please be respectful of one another?
And at least I'm going to object for the record before I ask the question about any communications she had with me or I had with her about this disputed debt that Mr. Goldstein could not substantiate after he sent it out.
I don't believe I've asked her any questions about the content of your
Okay,
communication.
let's go on with this. What do you want me to
No,
do?
just ask.
I'm trying to. So my question is, about when, since you volunteered that you had told Mr. O'Brien to contact David Goldstein, about when, date-wise, did that happen?
I don't know. Sometime after I got the letter, sometime after I called them several times and they wouldn't call me back, was when I called Mr. O'Brien and said, I don't know what to do about this.
So the letter you're referring to is the one from 8/6/2021?
Yes.
Okay. And so do you think that was within 30 days,
I don't
60
know.
days, 90 days?
I don't know. It was a phone call to Mr. O'Brien, so I didn't write down when I called him.
Okay. So to this exhibit,
Yes.
okay. So I'd like you to go to the second page. That's the last full paragraph on the page. Could you read that out loud?
Objection to reading it out loud until we see where is it, Mr. Hicks?
The last full paragraph on page 2. It begins, "This case is."
And that's a comment from me to you about an unrelated case which doesn't have anything to do with this matter.
You're the one that sent me the note, Ron.
And that doesn't make it admissible, Mr. Hicks. The rules of evidence would seem to apply.
Okay, so I don't know what, you made representations here. Can I just ask the witness to read the paragraph?
Well, I objected, so I assume Mr. Richter is going to consult with the chair and she can rule on it before it's answered.
You would say that's sustained.
Can I ask the witness to read the paragraph from line 2, beginning with the word reflecting? Is that not allowed either?
To do
What
what?
line, Mr. Hicks?
The last paragraph, take out the first line about Freeman. The second line, we're partial way through the line, it starts talking about this case, reflecting the constant content depths. Can you read from there?
I'd still sustain, Madam Chair. This is not, something that Ms. Schmidt necessarily had anything to do with.
She did, it's her counsel.
That's right.
By definition, she has something to do with
Yeah, it
it.
should be directed to Mr. O'Brien and not Ms. Schmidt. She did not.
Okay, can I call Mr. O'Brien?
Or are you done with Ms. Schmidt?
No.
Well, then we have to.
No, he can't call counsel.
Right, so.
I was gonna say.
So I can ask her about this document, for example, he makes representations in here about what those invoices were for. I can ask her if she was aware of that. Did she communicate to him what to communicate to me, etc.
I had no knowledge that he communicated to you.
So he sent this email delineating elements of this case without your knowledge?
Yes.
So I'll net it in. At the end it says, the last line, I'm going to read it. Blah, 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 picking up with, also filed a report. Let me take the line right before that. It starts with, there's a period, there's the word due and a period, and then the word Rep Schmidt. Rep Schmidt also filed a report after settling a claim that was submitted by an attorney for constant content for an outstanding bill for mail and postage that had never been invoiced by the vendor. That was a representation that your counsel made to me in this email. To your knowledge, is that a truthful statement or not?
I believe it is.
So that invoice was for, I know you're gonna say it's already been answered, was for, what is that, mail and postage?
What, if I say mail, I would assume that you would think there would be postage attached to it.
Okay, so to be clear, that invoice was not for resources, like Stephen Caraway or R.J. Mancini working in the field.
No. But if you know anything about hiring consultants or having volunteer consultants, in many cases, and I've been doing this a long time, they plus up their product to pay for themselves. A half a penny here, a half a penny there on large campaigns constitutes a lot of money. Never in my history have I paid a consultant outright. It's always been through the product.
So I guess I'm confused, was that invoice for mail and postage or for things other than mail and postage that was plussed up in some way?
It's the way that, they call it mail and postage, it's their way of getting their salaries paid. It's what they call it, they put it inside. When I've done my own campaigns and had my own printing done, it is generally far cheaper than when I have a consultant, because I'm not paying the middleman. I'm doing it directly. That middleman is the consultant, and they're getting a plus up on it, usually a quarter, a half, or a full penny on each one that has been mailed out.
Thank you.
So when you, so I just want to look at another date here real quick. So that my complaint, my first complaint, was filed on August 9th of 2021. So these conversations that you're talking about with David Goldstein were taking place between August 6th, 2021. So right about the time I was filing a complaint, and January 27th, 2022, per the dates we just outlined and agreed to. When David Goldstein contacted you, did you make any attempt to discern whether any costs for R.J. Mancini or Stephen Caraway were contained within David Goldstein's invoice?
No,
Why not?
David Goldstein didn't even know what the invoices were for.
How do you know they're for mail and postage if David Goldstein didn't know what they're for?
That was, I believe, said verbally.
Was he making that up, or did he know?
I have no way of knowing, Mr. Hicks. I only know he came back with, this is what we believe the bill is, and I said, I want to get it settled, I'll pay it.
So during the entire time of the primary campaign, your post-primary report, did you show any expenses that were in kind or otherwise from the Ohio Republican Party?
No.
Okay,
We're talking primary, correct?
correct,
Yeah.
correct. And I think, I don't want to be redundant with the question I've asked, so I apologize, but just to be clear, when Rob Secor did an affidavit, or R.J. Mancini did an affidavit that said they were not specifically assigned, et cetera, you were not involved in any of that before those affidavits were done?
Nope.
Okay, so when did you see those affidavits? Only after they were produced?
Yes.
Okay,
In fact, I saw those affidavits a couple of days ago.
Thank you.
so you didn't see them back on August 10th or 11th of 2021 when we were actually
No.
having a hearing?
No,
Not a preliminary review and so
No.
forth? So you had not seen the materials that
No.
were submitted for you?
no.
Why not?
I didn't see them. I can't answer why not. I don't know why not. I didn't see them.
So your counsel didn't share them with you?
I'm going to object to
I just think it's quite odd that somebody is
Well,
presenting documents.
You
Well,
know
let her
what,
answer
it's
the
not odd in
question.
my case, because I've had counsel before, and until you go to trial, they do a lot of things in the background that you don't know about. Next question.
Thank
I
you.
like the next question, thanks.
Again, she said she was sorry, there's a little level of frustration in the room, so,
Okay.
Madam Chair, could we take 5
yes,
for our first one?
yes. So let's take 5 minutes, it's 2:56, let's be back at 3:01.
Take 4 people, and then this is weird.
It's 3:04, we're gonna come back into session,
The same week.
3:05, and we will continue, I believe, Mr. Hicks, you had a question for Ms.
I don't think I had an open question, did I?
I don't know.
I might be Gatorade deprived, so I can't.
Yeah,
I have a few more questions
okay.
for JPL and Associates, Ms. Schmidt. What's your knowledge of JPL and Associates?
It's Jeff Longstreth.
Okay, I'm talking about JPL and Associates LLC.
It's John Lev, it's his company, I guess. I don't know. I don't have any, it's JPL LLC, that's what I know.
Okay, so you don't know anything else about that or how it was working for people who were endorsed by the speaker?
It was the campaign arm of Larry Householder, the Speaker of the House.
Okay, so now you do know a little more about it than just.
Right, well, you said JPL LLC. I don't know JPL LLC. I know Jeff Longstreth was the campaign arm of the
Well, I'm
Speaker.
being very specific, so I'm asking a specific question about a company named JPL and Associates LLC.
I don't know anything about JPL LLC. I know about Jeff Longstreth, not JPL LLC.
Okay, so you're not aware of JPL and Associates LLC providing resources to benefit candidates that were endorsed by the speaker?
Not the term JPL LLC, no.
Well, I said JPL and Associates LLC.
JPL and Associates LLC.
Okay. You previously mentioned Megan Fitzmartin. Who do you think that she worked for?
I was looking for the Speaker's campaign arm.
And what was that? I mean,
I don't know, what did they call it, the House Republican Alliance or something? I don't know. I met with her and Jake and John Longstreth, and I don't know who else. And they were the ones that provided the media and the literature, and I paid for the media, and I paid for the literature, and as I've explained before, every time I've ever done a campaign, I have not paid for the consultant. They plus it up in the product that they produce.
okay, you said the House Republican Alliance.
Maybe that was this year. I don't know what.
I think it might have been a different name
It might have
previously,
been a
but what
different
now
name
is
now.
called the House Republican Alliance.
Yes.
Somebody might here
Well,
know.
we changed the name again.
Yeah, the
so I
name
know what
changes
it
a
is.
lot, but it's basically
Is
would it
this-
be fair for me to characterize, it might have a different name now than it did then,
Yes,
but it's the legislative Republican PAC
Campaign,
slash
yes.
operation to support candidates.
yes.
And, okay, so, the House Republican Alliance,
Or whatever it was called.
so, okay, yeah, whatever it was called then, I'm trying to remember what it was called, but what is, then in your mind, you were receiving invoices from Constant Content. What was Constant Content to you?
When I received the invoice, they said that's where all the payments are being made through. I went, okay,
And those were payments, to your understanding, for whatever it was called then, but the House Republican Alliance?
whatever campaign work was done, that was the bill that was presented. Because when I got the bill, I said, what is this? And they said, oh, that's us, just pay it to this account. And I paid it to that account.
To your knowledge, did RJ Mancini worked for the House Republican Alliance, or whatever it was called then.
Can I interject quickly? The House Republican Campaign Committee, or the HRCC.
That's what it was called then?
Yes.
The HRCC, okay, back then it was called the HRCC.
I didn't know that, no, I don't know what he, I barely knew RJ Mancini, and I don't know who he worked for.
Did you think at any point in time that Stephen Caraway worked for the HRCC back then? I know he went, just for clarification for people here, long after the 2020 campaign, Stephen Caraway did work for the House Republican Alliance at that time. So I'm asking specifically about any knowledge you had of Stephen Caraway working for the HRCC back then.
No, not directly, no. I thought he had an indirect, but not a direct.
Okay, what do you mean by, can you define indirect?
I think he was part of the print, I don't know, he what? When I met with the team, he was not part of the team. I don't know what his role was with the team, but when I met with the team, he was not part of the team.
So when you say the team,
It was JPL, Megan Fitzmartin, and somebody
can
else.
we just have a convention? Call Jeff Longsworth, so we don't confuse his name with a company name. JPL's a company,
Okay,
okay? So who was the team?
well, I met with Jeff Longstreth once, and then it was me.
I'm not asking how many times you met, I just asked the question, what was the team?
I believe the team was Jeff, Megan, Anna somebody, were the main three. And my contact was with Megan.
Okay, did you ever have a contract or agreement with any entity for the services that were being provided?
No,
But you were of the understanding when those services were being provided that those were going to be payable by the campaign?
sorry, what did you say?
You were,
Could you clarify your question if you're talking about an oral contract or a written contract, Mr. Hicks?
okay, well, I'll go back to that. I'm asking any contract or agreement, oral or written.
Oral,
And what was the content of the oral contract?
that they would provide services and I would pay for them.
And that was it?
That's it. No, don't roll your eyes.
Oh,
We
no,
have a
no,
farm.
no.
No, we have a farm. We have a farm, and our farmer has been working that farm for 30 years, and never once did we have a written contract.
Let's, again, I shouldn't have to remind, but can we please be respectful? That would include rolling eyes, that would include, maybe being a little bit more vocal than, so can we please just treat each other with respect? Thank you.
So beyond that, they were gonna provide services and then bill you, you had no other understanding as to what the oral contract was?
No,
So what services did the team that you mentioned, the specific team you mentioned, Anna Lippincott, I believe is her name, or is it Lippencourt? Lippencourt, Megan Fitzmartin and Jeff Longstreth. Did I leave anybody out that was the team?
no, that was the team.
Okay, so what services did the team actually provide?
Print media and television.
Okay. And from a television standpoint, what services did they provide?
The filming and putting it on television.
Okay, and when you say the filming, is that one or more events?
We only did one,
Okay, so one.
yeah.
Okay, and could you describe that event, who was present?
It was at my sister-in-law's house. There were many people present. And I know you're gonna ask if Alan Freeman was one of them. Yes, he was. And I can't remember the other four that were present. There were a lot of people there.
When you said other four, did you say other four?
Candidates.
Okay, those were candidates, that's what I was gonna ask you to
There were- I
clarify.
think there were 5 and one had to leave early.
5 candidates,
Yeah.
including yourself,
Yes.
that were there. So that was the one and only film that took place. Was Megan Fish-Martin there?
She may have been.
Okay. What about mailers? You said that the services they provided were, you know, TV recording and placement, but what about mailers?
They did most of the mailers, but I did my own chasers.
Okay. And the mailers were, what was the process of doing a mailer with them?
They showed me the script, I approved the script, and they mailed it.
The script, I don't, you mean
The content of the mailer.
was it, did you provide input to the mailer, or did they just provide, here's a mailer, give it a go?
I edited it, would be the proper term. I edited what was being said.
Okay, who was the primary person that you went through the mailers with?
It was usually Megan.
Okay, Megan Fitzmartin. Any other person that you went through mailers with?
I don't recall, I don't believe so.
You don't believe so? Not Anna Lippencourt?
I don't think so.
Okay, and I'm assuming, but I'll ask the question, that Jeff Longstreth was not personally involved with you on
No.
mailers? Okay,
No,
so Megan Fitzmartin was the person you have a recollection of,
yes,
and you have no recollection of any other person being involved with mailers?
it's too long ago now.
Okay. Okay. Have you ever had issues in the past with properly reporting expenditures that took place on behalf of you or your campaign?
Maybe. I don't know, with the Elections Commission?
In any regard?
Yes,
Okay, can you describe any particular instances where you have had issues with not disclosing money spent on your behalf or on the behalf of your campaign?
it was a federal issue, and I am not at liberty to discuss it.
What do you mean by you're not at liberty to
I'm
discuss
not at
it?
liberty to discuss it. I'm not going to say anymore.
Why are you not at liberty to discuss
I
it?
am not at liberty to discuss it, and I'm not going to say anymore.
I'm going to ask the commission to ask the witness to respond.
I'm going to object as to what a federal matter, which would have been 20-plus years ago, has to do with reports filed on March 4th and June 4th of 2020.
Well, I think it goes to, you know, I guess the veracity and what the, you know, history is with campaign finance filings, and so I think there's a certain relevance there. Can you explain why you can't go into any further on that? Is there some sort of an agreement that was entered
Yes.
into that keeps you from speaking about it any
Yes.
further?
An agreement with who?
Again, Mr. Richard, I can't talk about this, and I'm not going to talk about it.
If you want to, I can maybe talk to her in the hall for a second and see if there's a way to
Yeah, would you please?
get around.
Look,
You know,
there
just-
was an issue, no, I wanted to move on. There was an issue, it was settled. I have been.
By the way, I would
not
advise her to take
No,
time with
no,
her counsel
stop,
versus
stop.
to start answering.
Stop, please. Let her talk.
It was an issue, it was resolved, it was with the Federal Elections Commission, and I'm not at liberty to talk about it. But everybody was satisfied in it. We came to an agreement not to agree, but it was, I can't talk anymore about it, and I'm not going to. I don't need another legal issue.
You know, I think you've got what you're wanting to
I
get to.
don't, I think this goes
There was an
directly,
agreement.
this goes directly to Ms. Schmidt having a history of not reporting things properly on campaign finance reports.
And I think you,
And a
by
history of-
doing this, you made that point.
Now, I want to understand what happened in that case to see if there's any correlations between that case and this case.
But if she's telling you she's not legally allowed to talk
I want to
about
know then the basis. I'd ask them to produce what's the basis by which she's not legally, is she in the witness protection program?
Your Honor, Chairman, I'd move to strike that comment, and I would also have an objection based on prior bad acts under evidence rule 402 are not admissible, if indeed that's what it is. And I have no idea, but it certainly has nothing to do with this case.
Can you just move on, Mr. Hicks? Let's try to-
No, I think it's a really important issue, and then I'd like to either brief on it or get an opinion, because I'm trying to establish a past pattern of not reporting things on campaign finance reports. And this mysterious, I'm not allowed legally to talk about it, I don't know what the basis of this claim is, or any legal veracity to it.
And at least my view is we ought to talk about the 2 dates, the reports in questions, the primary in question.
Well, that would be your
Not
view.
something that ever happened 20 years ago, that has nothing whatsoever to do with this case. We've gone so far afield and given him leeway so far afield that I'm going to continue to start objecting when he does this. Thank you.
I would like the witness to either answer or produce the basis upon which she's saying she's not legally allowed to discuss a prior campaign finance issue. If the commission needs to take time to think about this, I'd welcome you doing that, because I think we're getting into issues here that are really important.
But if someone tells you legally they're not allowed, why would you not believe that? I mean, if there's a.
Because I'm
gag
unaware,
order
can
or
anybody
whatever-
in this room
Well,
tell
no,
me,
that doesn't matter.
well, you asked me a question.
But I'm saying, if she legally tells you that, then why can we not move forward until we can figure that out? Can we?
Then I would say we should stop here and figure that out, because I'm not gonna accept this notion that there's some mystery reason she can't legally talk about a question about past campaign finance reporting. I'm unaware, I don't know if anybody else
I
is.
refuse to answer the question, period. Put it on record, I refuse to answer the question.
Because it
Because
might
I'm not
incriminate you?
going to answer the question. I'm not permitted to answer it, I'm not going to answer it, and I'm not going any further into it, period.
So you're refusing to answer on the grounds that it might incriminate you?
No.
You can do that in a civil,
Chris,
you can answer, you can take the fifth on individual questions.
It's 20 years old.
Can I just say something? I'm not going to have you twist my words. I've answered the question by saying I cannot answer the question, period. I don't think we
Which
need
is
to
frequently
negotiate
present
this.
in settlement
I
agreements.
can't do it.
You can't talk about the already public knowledge about this issue?
Whatever's in the
Okay.
public, you can read about. I'm not going to discuss it. I'm not at liberty to discuss it. I told you that.
Okay. That's your answer. So it would seem right at impasse. Are you refusing to move forward?
I want the witness to answer the questions,
Well,
or for her to produce what's this legal basis by which she's not allowed to answer questions about past campaign finance reporting.
okay,
I'm unaware of any legal basis that that would be the case.
well, that doesn't mean it's not there, just because.
Doesn't mean it is either. And you asked me the question, Ms. Kaufman, you asked me the question
I know, but I mean,
why wouldn't I just accept it, okay? No, I wouldn't just accept it. If she's
That's not
making
what
the
I said.
assertion,
I said if
I wanna
someone
know
asked
what
you,
the
would you
assertion's
do
based
it?
on.
And so, okay. What's our recourse at this point?
Well, I'd say, we can always come back to this issue, just move on.
We can come back
That's
to that
right.
is what I was trying to get at, if we can go forward now.
Unless this is his last question, then we could adjourn for the day, but I assume he has more questions. So why don't you ask your next question?
Well, what
no,
I,
Mr. O'Brien, okay, I'll chair the meeting, thank you. So if you could please move forward, and then we can come back to this at a later time.
I don't want to come back to this, I want to get this addressed now. We're currently at 3:23. You guys have put forward a 3:30 stop. I don't want to proceed into any more questions until I get answers to these questions, because some of my future questions are predicated upon what happened with our past campaign finance filings.
In fairness, I won't be able to answer those either. I'm
Thank you. I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. So at this point, if you won't move forward and you cannot move forward, then I think we're at an impasse, and it's, at this point, we are gonna have to continue this matter. I have some dates, and hopefully they will be dates that are acceptable to you all. And I will give you the dates if you'd like to look and see what your availability is.
Well, I know Ms. Schmidt, when I asked that question, told me she had a granddaughter's graduation, grandson on May 25th, her next meeting date.
This would be on June 22nd,
I'm out of town at a wedding.
okay, on 7/20,
7/20 might. be-
July.
yep, July 20th, or August the 10th.
August the 10th might be that primary.
Yeah.
Oh,
Or is that a Thursday?
That's a
That's a
Thursday.
Thursday.
August the 10th is a Thursday. Their meetings are always on Thursday, right, pretty much?
Yes, always.
So-
7/20 or 8/10, since the 22nd is not gonna work.
I would prefer July 20th.
Okay, that's acceptable to you?
At this point, unless I'm called into session and it's a serious vote, then I won't be able to be there.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes, it's fine with me, Madam Chair.
thank you.
Can I ask the question is, on the issue of her ability or not for testifying on the issue of her past campaign finance reporting, what steps do we need to take, or does the commission need to take to clarify the legal basis of that? Should we brief it? She briefs why she can't testify on that, and I brief why she should?
Well, I think
I would suggest that I talk with her and then I can communicate with you and Mr. Richter.
that's what I was going to say.
And me?
Yeah,
I'll take you.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
You.
My bad.
and Mr. Richter.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll resolve that as to what needs to happen so we can clarify the issue beforehand.
Correct.
Can I ask another question, scheduling question? So May 25th, where Ms. Schmidt says she's not available, okay? I have a conflict on that date, but I can change it if I absolutely need to. And right now, there's 3 other things. The 2 Freeman matters and the Brian Stewart matter that are all scheduled for the 25th. Don Bry is already saying he wants the Freeman ones moved. So I just want to put out there on the record that if there was a way to move all of those things to the July 20th, then that would be better for my schedule. It would clear that, and already you've got Don Bryce saying he's not going to do the 25th on the preliminary reviews around the other Ellen Freeman cases. I'm not necessarily asking for an answer to that right now, but
Yeah, I'll look into it. That's certainly a possibility, but I'll look into it.
and I asked, just if you bear with me, I'm going to check my phone real quick. I asked Representative Stewart. I asked him, I just want to see if he responded. I asked him if he was okay with pushing his out. And it doesn't look like he responded, so hopefully he'll respond.
Well, you can leave it with us. You can take it with you.
Thank you. Okay, so at this time, this matter will be continued to the 7/20/2023 meeting of the Ohio Elections Commission. Do we need that to vote, or?
Not necessarily, I think all parties are agreed if
Okay.
that's the case, so we'll just continue for that
All
day.
right, so since that works for everyone, we're gonna go ahead and continue this matter at that time. So, are there any other?
Not from my perspective.
Okay. So, having nothing else, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion, Ophelia thirded it.
Sorry, got it? I apologize.
So we have a motion on the floor that's been duly seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. This meeting is adjourned.